To help your swimmers go fast in freestyle, they have to have an effective pull. And unfortunately, simply telling them to keep their elbow up or telling them to get a vertical forearm isn't going to get the job done. To build the skills that create speed, we need to take a comprehensive approach. And that's exactly what we're going to do in this video. Hi everyone, Andrew here, helping you help your swimmers get faster. And today, we're going to talk about creating an effective pull in freestyle. As always, I'll keep it simple so that you know why it matters, what swimmers have to do, and then the different tools you can use to make that happen. Let's dive in. So why does it matter? Why do swimmers have to create a lot of propulsion with their upper body? Well, to go forwards, swimmers need to create propulsion. Having great alignment allows for speed, but if there's no propulsion, great alignment alone isn't going to create any speed. And the more propulsion swimmers can create, the more speed they're going to create. And where does most of that propulsion come from? It comes from the upper body. The arms can move a lot more water than the legs can, and as a result, they create a lot more propulsion than the legs do. So if swimmers are lacking with their pull, they're going to be in a lot of trouble. And really, even if they have an effective pull, it can never be too good, as more propulsion means more speed. And while swimmers can create more propulsion by moving their arms faster, they can only move their arms so fast. To optimize their performance, they have to get as much out of each stroke as possible, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So what makes a great pull? When it really comes down to it, the bottom line, a great pull moves a lot of water with each stroke. So regardless of how they're doing that, if a swimmer can move a lot of water with each stroke, they have an effective pull. Of course, there are going to be certain strategies that are going to be more effective for doing so. And to move a lot of water with each stroke, they have to use a large surface area. They want to orient the hand and the forearm so that it's facing backwards. If they just use the hand, they're missing out on all that surface area of the forearm, and that means they won't be creating as much propulsion as otherwise possible with the whole arm. So establishing a big surface area is a key aspect of having a great pull. But not only do they need to establish a great surface area, they need to maintain that surface area over a large range of motion. It's not about moving a lot of water in a very short time period. It's about moving a lot of water throughout the entire stroke. To do that, swimmers need to establish effective positions, establish a large surface area as early in the stroke as possible, and they need to maintain that surface area throughout the entire stroke. The better they can do both of those, again, the more water they'll move. Finally, to have a great pull, swimmers need to learn to accelerate the limb. The more pressure they can create on the water throughout the pull, the more propulsion they're going to create. If swimmers patiently move their arm through the water, even if they're doing everything correct from a technical standpoint, they're not going to create much propulsion, they're not going to create much speed. Even when swimming over longer distances, once the pull is set up, there's going to be an acceleration of the limb, or there's not going to be much speed. So ultimately, a great pull is simple. Swimmers need to move a lot of water with each stroke, and they do that by creating a large surface area, moving it over a large range of motion, and accelerating the limb as they do. So we'll show a swimmer racing over 1,500 meters and a swimmer racing over 50 meters so that you can see both the commonalities and the differences between sprint swimmers and distance swimmers. We'll use these two swimmers because they clearly illustrate the concepts we've discussed. So if we watch this swimmer here, right now, he's got a big surface area facing backwards. You can see that whole forearm straight up and down. That's a huge paddle to pull with. And as we watch through, he holds that surface area through the entire stroke. So from the beginning to the end, he's holding that position. So again, if he wants to move a lot of water, big surface area, large range of motion, that's how that gets done. If we watch here too, I'll just go here frame by frame. You can see that the hand speed picks up right there through the back of the stroke. So once he's got everything set up, he's going to accelerate the limb through the back of the stroke. So moving a lot of water with a big surface area, a big range of motion, and accelerating the limb speed. That's what he's doing, and that's why he's swimming fast. So our second example here is a 50-meter race, and as you can see here, right there, he's established a big surface area. He's going to hold that through the back of the stroke, and he's going to be really effective the whole way through. So again, just with our other swimmer, big surface area, moving it straight backwards, and holding a lot of water. The difference between the two is the sprint athlete, it's going to be a little bit more rounded, and he's going to hold the arm a little bit deeper and hold that position a little bit deeper throughout the back of the stroke. So if you watch here, you can see his arm's in a really great position through the back half of the stroke, and that's going to create a lot of propulsion. You can watch it on the other arm under the water. You can see huge surface area. He's almost finished his stroke, and he's still got that surface area, and he's going to hold that through the back of the stroke. Acceleration right there through the back of the stroke. It's a little bit more patient in the beginning, and then it's going to be accelerated right there through the back of the stroke. So again, just like our distance swimmer, slightly different application, but same basic principles: big surface area, large range of motion, and then accelerating that limb throughout the stroke. So these are the objectives we need to help swimmers realize if they're going to have effective pulls, if they're going to move a lot of water. Big surface area, big range of motion, and then accelerate the limbs. Whether they're swimming a 1,500-meter race or a 50-meter race, they've got to execute those same basic skills, and the better they can do that, the more water they'll move, the more propulsion they'll create, and the faster they're going to swim. So what's the challenge? What makes it difficult to help swimmers learn to create more propulsion? Well, the first challenge is that there's different strokes for different folks. Swimmers have different anatomy. They literally have different lengths of bones and shapes of bones. That means the positions they'll be able to get into are going to be different. They have different ranges of motion in the upper body, whether that's the wrist, the elbow, the shoulder, the rib cage, all of it, it's going to be different. They have different levels of strength and power, and that's going to influence how much water they can move with each stroke, and also the positions in which they can move a lot of water, and then also event specificity. As we saw, there's a difference between the 1,500-meter swimmer and the 50-meter swimmer. Same principles, but they have to execute the pull slightly differently. So for these reasons, there's not going to be one perfect pull, and unfortunately, it's not always easy to tell what's going to be the most effective path, what's going to be the most effective strategy for each person. One, because we can't really necessarily know the differences in anatomy, range of motion, and strength and power. And two, they interact in ways that we can't always understand, we can't always predict. So for those reasons, it makes it difficult to tell a swimmer exactly what to do in order to swim fast. Another challenge is that swimmers have to maintain pressure on the water in order to move forward throughout the entire pull. To do that, they have to have at least some awareness of what's happening, even if it's only at a subconscious level. They have to be able to feel what's happening, and they have to be able to make those micro adjustments in order to maintain pressure on the water as the hand path changes slightly as they execute the pull. And small little differences can add up to more speed or less speed depending on whether they're executed effectively. And the challenge for us as coaches is that it's really difficult to see these things. And even if you can see them, it's not always obvious if it's an effective way to maintain pressure on the water or not. Because again, not knowing their anatomy, their range of motion, their strength of power, an optimal path or an optimal adjustment for one swimmer might be suboptimal for another, and vice versa. Finally, executing great pull is pretty much counterintuitive to every other movement that we do on land. Whenever we pull something towards us, even like a pull-up, we drop the elbow in close to the body and we pull from that position. Whereas in swimming, we need to keep the elbow out wide. We need to make sure that the forearm is facing backwards, and we need to delay pulling that arm into the side as long as possible. That's what's required to maintain a great surface area. So they have to create force from positions that are totally different from what they would do on land. And especially when they try to swim fast, it's difficult to maintain those positions because they're really counterintuitive and they go against their instincts. So to help swimmers execute a great pull, we have to help them figure out the best pulling pattern for them. We have to help them learn to feel the water so that they can more effectively make some of these micro adjustments. Finally, we have to help them trust that the movements that they're using, even if they don't feel normal or instinctual, are actually the most effective ones to help them go fast. If we can overcome these challenges, we're going to be able to help swimmers build an effective pull, and we're going to help them go fast. So let's talk solutions. How do we actually help swimmers build a more effective pull? As much as possible, I try to help swimmers learn these skills while performing full stroke swimming. By using different performance goals and different training aids, we can get a lot of change. And I'm going to show you 4 different strategies that I like to use in order to get that effect. Before we do, I'm going to go over 2 drills that can be really helpful for swimmers that need a little bit extra help. By using these different strategies, we can help swimmers overcome the challenges of learning an effective pull and find a solution that's going to allow them to create more propulsion and create more speed. Solution number 1 is power pulls with a buoy. So what they're going to do is they're going to be on the surface of the water. They're going to have a buoy in. They're going to have their arms out in front. And basically, they're going to just take a butterfly pull or a pull out and pull straight back. So this activity is all about moving more water with each stroke. There's no kick. They don't have to worry about body position. It's super simplified and super focused. The only goal is to help swimmers understand how to move water. The more water they can move with each pull, the more effective they're going to be. And it's really easy to see the impact of an effective pull versus a less effective pull. I very rarely use this particular drill just in isolation. I almost always combine it with different stroke counts, different types of resistance, or different types of hand postures. Those are strategies we'll discuss shortly. Just know that power pulls are much more effective when used in combination with other strategies to help swimmers learn a more effective pull. So here it is in action. Just set up the stroke and just pull straight back. So it's super simple. You don't have to scull necessarily like this swimmer is. You just think about setting it up and just ripping it back. Again, we'll use different strategies to help encourage swimmers to find more effective ways to move water with each stroke. Super simple, just focused on moving water backwards to help swimmers move forward. Next drill is called underwater recovery. And so it's exactly what it sounds like. Swimmers are going to recover their arms under the water. So it's a simplified version of freestyle where the main focus is just on the pull. In contrast to the power pulls, there's now a focus on alternating arm actions and tying the pull to the rotation. The focus is still just on pulling the arm straight back to help the swimmer move forward. This can also help to improve pull timing, again, as the rotation and the pull have to happen in concert. By taking away the arm recoveries, we can make it super simple. They just set up the stroke, reach forward, set up the stroke, reach forward, set up the stroke, and pull. They don't have to worry about anything else. They can just focus on moving as much water with each stroke. And as with power pulls, this strategy works even better when paired with stroke counts, resistance, and different hand postures. By asking for performance, they're more likely to figure out a more effective way to pull. So as the name implies, some are just going to recover the arms underwater, and they're just going to focus on pulling straight back and executing an effective pull with each stroke. So the main focus here is not on the recoveries, obviously. It's just on the pull. And all swimmers are trying to do is set up an effective pull straight back, and move as much water as possible. It's a simplified version to help them really focus on that key skill. Having talked about the drills, now we'll talk about the strategies you can use with any activity to help swimmers improve their pull. First up is resistance. You can use parachutes, you can use stretch cords, you can use pulley systems like power towers. It doesn't really matter what you use. In all cases, it's an effective tool. When swimming against resistance, swimmers have to be more effective with each stroke. They have to move more water backwards to move forward. They have to have more direct pulling actions. The consequences of side-to-side motions are going to be a lot more obvious, and they have to create more force with each stroke in order to overcome that added resistance. Beyond those direct effects, resistance also provides more effective feedback. It provides a different sensation, and for some swimmers, it can allow them to feel what they're doing as their arm moves through the water, and then that allows them to better feel the pressure that they're creating throughout their pull, or in some cases, it can make it more obvious when they're losing pressure or they're not creating much pressure at all. So resistance can be really powerful for helping increase sensory awareness, helping make swimmers more aware of how effective they're being with their pulling. And if they can better feel the opportunities for improvement, they're much more likely to be able to create a change. And as we talked about earlier, having an effective pull is dependent on strength and power, so resistance training in the water can also facilitate some physical adaptations, and that can allow swimmers to develop some of the physical characteristics needed to produce propulsion. The more strength they have, and the more strength they have in the water, the higher the ceiling is for moving a lot of water. So for all these reasons, resistance training in the water can be really powerful for helping swimmers learn to create more effective pulls. And it's not about using a ton of resistance, it's just about using enough resistance to encourage change. Next strategy is using different hand postures. So if you take away the hand, you close the fist, that encourages the use of the forearm. Swimmers still have to create propulsion, and their main option is no longer there, so they're going to use a secondary option, and that's the forearm. They've never used it before. That's a new learning experience. Now they're going to be able to figure out how to use the forearm and how to use it effectively. A second reason different hand postures can be effective is that when swimmers close the hand, they're removing the flow of the water over the fingers, over the palm, and that eliminates a lot of the sensory information that they otherwise would be feeling. So that sensation kind of disappears, and they can't feel anything, but then when they open the hand back up, all of a sudden they're really going to be in tune. They're really going to feel all that sensory information in ways that they previously couldn't. Even though the water's moving over the hand in the same way, what they'll feel, what they'll perceive will be totally different. If we can change their perception of the sensation, we can change how they swim because they're going to be much more tuned in to the pressure they're creating and the feel they have for what they're doing. There's lots of different ways you can do this. You can change their hand position, so you can go closed fist, you can go OK sign, you can go horns, you can go single finger, you can go double finger, you can do different fingers and different combinations of fingers. It's all effective. You can also have them hold objects such as a golf ball, a tennis ball, even a lacrosse ball. You can have them hold their paddles upside down, and you can even have them pinch the paddles on the side and have them swim like that. They're all effective strategies, and you can use it while swimming or doing drills or pretty much anything. Next strategy is stroke counts. One of the reasons I really like stroke counts is because they require change. If swimmers have to hit different stroke counts, they have to swim differently. You can't hit a different stroke count doing the exact same thing. And it requires swimmers to do something different rather than just suggesting it. So you can suggest that they keep their elbow up, or you can tell them you have to take 10 strokes. In the latter case, you're going to get a change no matter what. That's why stroke counts can be so effective. Stroke counts are also powerful because they're objective. Swimmers either did it or they didn't do it. They either changed their stroke count or they didn't. And so it provides really clear feedback as to whether they're moving effectively, as to whether they're changing their skills effectively, and whether they're performing effectively. So if they have a goal and they don't hit it, it's very clear that they didn't hit it and they have to do something differently. At the same time, if they do hit it, it's also very clear that what they were doing was working and they should probably try to do that again. Lastly, using stroke counts tends to promote more stroke length, as fewer strokes usually means more length, and more length usually means more water moved per stroke. So by asking swimmers to use lower stroke counts, we tend to encourage them to learn to move more water with each stroke, which is what we're trying to accomplish here. Last strategy that, again, you can use in combination with all the previous ones is to isolate the arms. Swimmers can't compensate with the legs if they're wearing a buoy or if they're wearing a band or if they have both on. So if they're swimming against resistance, they have to create more propulsion with the upper body. They can't use the legs to cheat it. If you have them use different hand postures, so say you have them close their fists, again, they can't compensate with the legs. They've got to figure it out. If you have them hit lower stroke counts, they can't just kick more. They have to be more effective with the arms. So if you're trying to improve the upper body, you're trying to improve the pull, isolating the arms can be really, really effective. It allows you to overload skills, like we just talked about. They can't use the legs to overcome the challenge, and it overloads fitness. They have to do all the work with the upper body. And so when you want a more targeted intervention, you want to take away the legs, you want to take away the lower body options, isolating the arms is a really powerful strategy, and you can use it with pretty much any activity that you have. So having gone over the solutions, let's see what it looks like in practice. This is more of a skill-based set with not a whole lot of pressure from a performance perspective. They're going to go 3 rounds through. They're going to go 325s power pulls with a buoy. They're going to take 1 less stroke per 25. They're going to go 100 freestyle, 1 less stroke per 25. Then they're going to go 325s underwater recovery with a buoy, take 1 less stroke per 25. Then they'll do another 100 freestyle, take 1 less stroke per 25. They'll follow that up with 325s power pulls again, but now they're going to descend 1 to 3. Then they're going to go 50 freestyle, build to strong, and they're going to go 325s underwater recovery. Now again, descend 1 to 3 instead of taking 1 less stroke. Then a 50 freestyle, build to strong. And for all the drill repetitions, on round 1, they're going to go with horns. In round 2, they're going to go closed fist. And round 3, they're going to go okay hands. That's going to help them interact with the water in different ways. And they're going to have to learn to use the forearm more effectively, especially to take fewer strokes and to create more speed when they're descending. After each drill, we're going to go those 100s freestyle and the 50s freestyle to give them an opportunity to kind of put it all together and see if they can make it happen when they're actually swimming freestyle. So we're using drills here, we're using stroke counts here, we're using speed here, we're using the buoy to isolate the upper body, and we're using different hand postures to help challenge their pulls. We're using a lot of different strategies here, and by doing so, we're putting a lot of pressure on the ability to pull well and really encouraging them to find a more effective way to execute their pull. Next set is a little bit more of an endurance focus. They're going to go 2 rounds through this. They're going to go 50 freestyle with a buoy and pinch paddles and a parachute that take as few strokes as possible. So they have to overcome the resistance of the parachute. They can't use their legs to help. They have to take as few strokes as possible, and they've got to pinch the paddle when they're pulling through the water. So that means they're going to have to be really stiff, really stable with their wrist, or that paddle is going to be moving all over the place. They're going to have to get in a really great position, use the forearm effectively, and be really stable and stiff throughout those pulls. That's going to set up each section of the set. Then they're going to go 3 100s freestyle. They're going to descend 1 to 3 at the same stroke count. So they have to create more speed without taking more strokes. That means they have to be more effective with each stroke, and they're going to have to execute a more effective pull. They're going to do that by holding a single paddle upside down, like so. And doing so is going to encourage them to use the forearm more effectively. Because the wrist is locked, they have to move the forearm and the hand together. So if they want that hand facing backwards, the forearm's going to have to face backwards as well. Then they're going to go 150 freestyle. They're going to negative split at the same stroke count. So the second half of the swim has to be faster, but they can't take more strokes, so they have to be more efficient. We're going to repeat the same thing on the second half of the set. The only difference is now they're going to use the paddle on the right side instead of the left side, and that 150 needs to be a little bit faster. The benefit of using one paddle at a time instead of two, it allows swimmers to become more aware of what their arms are doing at the same time because they're going to be getting very different sensations on both arms at the same time. One arm's going to have the paddle upside down, one arm's going to be pulling through the water normally, and that contrast can be really effective for helping swimmers learn and become more aware of what their hands are doing and what they can do about it to create more speed and more length. Last set here is more of a speed set. They're going to go 2 rounds through this. Start off with 2 25s power pulls with a buoy and parachute and upside down paddles. So again, holding the paddle upside down. The first one is going to be as few strokes as possible, and number 2 is going to be as fast as possible. So they're trying to get as long as they can with the parachute, with the upside down paddles, and then they're going to try to get across the pool as fast as they can, again, with the parachute and the upside down paddles. And then they're going to go 4 25s freestyle with a parachute, minimize stroke count and time. So they're trying to go as fast as they can with as few strokes as they can. They're going to go closed fist and a buoy on the first repetition. That's going to encourage the use of the forearm. The second repetition is going to be just the buoy, so they can open things back up, but they still can't use the legs. And then the last 2, they're going to swim them. Again, the first one's a closed fist, help them figure out how to use the forearm more effectively. And that's all with a parachute, so they have to overcome that added resistance. Then they're going to go 4 more 25s. First one's minimize stroke count and time. Then they're going to add 1 stroke and go faster than they did on the previous one. They're going to add another stroke and go even faster, and the last 25 freestyle is fast. So let's say they took 12 strokes and it took them 12 seconds on that first 25. So then they go up to 13 strokes and maybe they go 11.8. And then on the next one, they're going to go up to 14 strokes, maybe they go 11.3. And then on the last one, they just try to go faster. They don't have any stroke count restriction. So we're using the drill, we're using the different hand postures, we're using the stroke counts, we're using speed, we're using them in combination to really challenge swimmers to find more effective pulling patterns, and we're doing it at speed so that they can learn how to execute these skills while swimming fast. As they continue to improve in these activities, as they continue to improve in these sets, they necessarily have to learn more effective pulling skills. It's the only way they can take fewer strokes. It's the only way they can create more speed. Rather than just telling swimmers what to do, we can put them in positions where they have to figure out more effective skills. And if they can figure out more effective skills, they're going to swim faster. When swimmers have a great kick behind their stroke, they tend to swim pretty fast in freestyle. But just doing a lot of hard kick sets isn't necessarily going to get the job done. Swimmers have to understand the skill of kicking, and they have to be able to execute that skill while kicking, and more importantly, they have to be able to execute that skill of kicking while they're actually swimming. And they have to be able to do that at high speeds and under pressure. We're going to take a look at all that in this video. We're going to talk about why kicking is so important, what an effective kick is, what an effective kick looks like, why it can be difficult to actually get this skill to show up in races, and then we're going to talk about what it takes, what swimmers need to do, a game plan for improving that skill during training, as well as some example training sets. Let's check it out. Why do the legs matter? Well, the legs are the glue of the stroke. They help swimmers create more propulsion to move them down the pool. The legs help to improve position, which means better alignment and less resistance. And the reason that that's an issue is that the legs tend to sink, and when the arms are pulling in the front half of the stroke, that also has a sinking effect on the legs. And so the faster swimmers want to go, obviously the harder they're going to pull, the more the legs are going to sink, and the harder they're going to have to work with the legs in order to keep the hips up. And that's one of the big reasons you tend to see a big kick in sprinters. Not only are they trying to create a lot of propulsion, but just as importantly, they're trying to keep the hips up, which is harder and harder to do the more and more they use their arms. It's also critical for timing. It can help shift the hips slightly, and that can make a small yet significant difference in order to help the stroke flow, and that means more speed for less effort. Now, when the legs go, we have all the opposite effects. So swimmers get less propulsion from the legs. That in and of itself means less speed, but they also lose their position, which means more resistance, which means even less speed, and that means it's going to take more energy to move through the water, which means they're going to get more tired, and then it becomes a vicious cycle, and they're also going to have less effective timing because the legs aren't helping with those body shifts, those transitions from side to side. Finally, the legs use a lot of energy. And so if they're going to execute all these skills and they're not particularly fit, it's going to cause a lot of problems. Swimmers are going to get tired faster. They're going to lose the beneficial impact of the legs, and the whole thing's going to fall apart. When you see swimmers fade and they fade bad, a lot of times the legs are gone and then the whole stroke falls apart. So what is effective kicking? So it's definitely not just kicking from the hips with a completely straight leg. It's not just kicking from the knees where the knee just bends like that. It's a pretty complex action that involves the hips and the knees, And when the leg recovers pretty straight and then snaps back through, that's going to create a really big whipping action. And when the foot finally snaps through in the end, that's going to create an acceleration of the foot. That's going to mean a lot of propulsion, and that's going to help swimmers execute an effective kick, moving them down the pool and keeping the hips up in the water. And so that's one of the challenges of executing a great kick, is that swimmers need to manage both the hip and the knees and let that travel through down to the foot, as opposed to working with just the knees and just the hips. And so while it's often thought to be a relatively simple skill, there is some complexity to it. And if swimmers don't manage it well, they can't execute it well, they're going to struggle to have an effective kick. So if we watch these sprinters here, we're going to see that the knee bends there on the down kick, and then it comes straight back up on the up kick. And when the knee finally bends here, it's because he's actually bringing his thigh forward again, and that's what bends the knee, not trying to consciously bend the knee. So a relatively straight up kick right there, and then the leg reverses, and that's what bends the knee, and then the foot smashes through. So straight on the up kick, bent on the down kick, and then smashing through with the foot. And you can see right there, the foot's bent backwards and then flicks through in the end, and that creates that little extra bit of propulsion. It's all coming from the whip that's set up with the straight leg on the recovery. So if we watch again, straight there on the recovery, bent on the way down, straight there on the recovery, bent on the way down, straight there on the recovery, bent on the way down, straight there on the recovery. And so that's a pretty complex movement that's going to be difficult for some swimmers to manage, and that's why getting really good at kicking is more than just working really hard. There has to be that complex wave-like action. So bent on the way down, straight on the way up, and that's what's going to allow that whipping action. So it's straight, and then bam, it whips back down, and that creates a lot of propulsion, and it allows for an effective recovery without creating a lot of resistance by just bending the knee back and forth. So what makes improving the kick difficult? First of all, it happens fast, and so that makes it hard to control the kick, because if swimmers try to think about exactly what they're doing, they try to slow it down, it happens way too slow, and that ends up ruining the entire rhythm of the stroke. And they have to manage those bent and straight kicks all in that compressed amount of time, and they have to do it in an opposite manner. So when one leg is going down, there's going to be a bend to it, and the other leg is going up, it's going to be straight, and then the leg positions switch. That's really difficult to manage in general. That's even more difficult to manage at really, really high speeds. And even at relatively slow stroke rates, if they're using a 6-beat kick, those feet are moving pretty fast, and that becomes even more true when swimmers are sprinting. And they've got to manage this all while the arms are moving in opposition, and the kick isn't just random, it's tied to the arms as well. And so managing all these different challenges is really difficult, especially at really high speeds, to make it all happen in a fluid and effective manner. And lastly, the legs have to be able to sustain those efforts throughout the entire race distance, because if swimmers lose control of the legs, like we talked about earlier, bad things are going to happen. There'll be less propulsion, swimmers are going to lose their alignment, and they're going to lose their timing, and everything's going to fall apart, and the legs are going to get even more tired, and that's going to make it even more difficult, and it just becomes a vicious cycle. So the skill has to be there, and the fitness has to be there, and swimmers have to make it happen in the context of swimming while using the arms at the same time. So let's talk solutions. Swimmers have to figure out how to kick effectively, how to kick efficiently. They have to learn those key skills at high speeds. They have to manage the bent and straight aspects of the kick. They have to manage that when the legs are moving in opposition, and they have to manage that while integrating the arms as well. And so if we can help swimmers figure out how to do that, how to figure out how to train the legs hard while affecting really good skills, and learn to transition those kicking skills into swimming and also train those skills really hard, we're going to allow swimmers to be really effective at creating a lot of propulsion. First up is vertical kicking, and the reason I like this is because swimmers don't have a preconceived notion of how they should kick when they're vertical kicking. They haven't done a ton of it, most likely, and it's not going to be like just kicking on a board where they're going to fall into the same patterns. So swimmers can actually focus on the skill of kicking, and there's no expectation what it should feel like, and they're not necessarily trying to create or hit certain times. So that alone can be really effective for creating change because it's a different context, different situation, and swimmers are more open to doing things differently. It's also easier to emphasize the up kick and kicking from the hip because you can train the ability to move the legs relatively straight when vertical kicking, and that's a lot easier to do than with on a board. And you can train the skill of actually keeping the legs straight on the up kick, and just as importantly, you can train the fitness of the muscles responsible for pulling the leg back and keeping it straight And that can sometimes be difficult to do when training on a board. So we can overload that skill, the straight leg up kick, and we can overload the muscles responsible for executing that skill. Just as importantly, you can communicate with swimmers really easily. They're right in front of you, their head's out of the water. You can encourage, you can provide some sort of feedback, and you can help them engage in what they're doing. And finally, vertical kicking can be really difficult. It can be done at full speeds. You can load it, you can use drag socks, you can challenge it in lots of different ways that further encourage them to execute these skills under pressure. So we use vertical kicking to get them to figure out the skill, and we can train the kick by having them do vertical kicking in more and more difficult situations. So here's an example, and this particular swimmer is really focused on keeping the legs relatively straight, so they're really trying to kick from the hips, and you can see that that up kick right there is really straight, and then he bends it coming forwards, and that's the emphasis here, is straight on the up kick, and then you can bend it forwards. You can see how that foot snaps through at the bottom. So it's a lot easier to help swimmers feel that. It's a lot easier to help swimmers execute that, and because he has to keep his head above the water, and he's got his arms out in this case, he has to actually create some propulsion or he's not going to go anywhere. So we can have swimmers do a better job with the up kick here, and we can force them to create propulsion on the down kick because they have to keep the head up out of the water. Of course, we can train it hard too, so it's a really powerful strategy for helping create change. Another effective tool that I find to be really useful is kicking on the back. And so when flutter kicking, a lot of work is done on the board and the down kick is often overemphasized. And so as a result, swimmers struggle to execute the up kick effectively. That's a skill, and just as importantly, it's also a fitness issue in that the muscles simply aren't worked as much, they're not as strong, they're not as fit, and so they're not as effective in executing the kick. However, if you flip them on their back, there's going to be a lot more emphasis on the up kick, and that's going to challenge the skill of it, and just as importantly, it's going to challenge the fitness of the legs, both from a strength perspective and from an endurance perspective. And so we can develop more balanced kicking by exaggerating, by overemphasizing the up kick, by having swimmers kick on the back. And of course, this can be done at a range of intensities to challenge the skill in a lot of different ways, and just as importantly, to develop fitness in a lot of different ways. So if swimmers are struggling with the up kick and they tend to do a lot of their kicking with a board, it can be really useful to do some kicking on the back to develop that fitness. So the video is pretty self-explanatory here. They're on streamline, they're on their back, and they're kicking pretty hard. And there's going to be some knee bend, of course, still, but there's going to be more emphasis on the up kick, the more emphasis on driving the fitness in the back of the legs. And of course, you can have them go arms by their side too. That's going to create more resistance on their body. They're not going to be streamlining, and so that can be an overload from a strength perspective as well, and it's still going to emphasize the same skills. A really powerful strategy is kicking with drag socks, and that's because drag socks require swimmers to execute that whip-like kicking. They have to kick from the knee and the hip, or they just don't go anywhere. It's not going to work. And so if they kick with completely straight legs, they're never going to get that whipping action. They won't create any propulsion. If they just bend the knees, they may get that whipping action going on the way down, but they're just going to pull the leg straight back, and that's going to be like putting on the brakes. And so swimmers learn really, really fast that if they kick in certain ways, they don't go anywhere. If they kick in other ways that are more effective, like the ones we want them to use, they're going to start making forward progress. And of course, the load, by using the resistance, now we've got stronger skills, now we've got stronger legs, and we've got better fitness, and it all happens even faster. So this is a really, really effective tool because swimmers have to kick well and they have to kick hard in order to be effective. And for those reasons, it's a really, really powerful tool. So just like you'd expect, it's just regular kicking, but you're having them use drag socks. And of course, you can do this with a board, you can do it on their stomach, or you can just have them do it with any type of swimming, and that's going to overload the skill and the strength of the legs. Now, once swimmers have a solid understanding of how to kick effectively, the job isn't done because they actually have to learn to use that kick while they swim. So that's where leg-driven swimming comes in. The goal here is to get swimmers to learn to kick effectively while they're swimming. There's a skill to kicking, we've already addressed that, but there's also a skill to kicking while swimming, and that's what we're going to work on here. So any strategy that encourages swimmers to overemphasize the legs while swimming is going to be effective. And so some different options are, we've got stick drill, and that's where they have an object, typically a small PVC pipe, but also you can use a paddle, and they're swimming, and they hold it with one hand, they take a stroke, and then they grab it with the other, then they take a stroke, and they grab it with the other, and they take a stroke, they grab it with the other, they take a stroke, and obviously they're limited to how fast they can move their arms, and if you ask them to go fast, they're going to have to use their legs to really drive that. And so the goal there is to overemphasize the legs. You can also have them do extreme stroke count swimming. So if they normally take 16 strokes a lap, you can have them take 8 strokes a lap, and you tell them, I want you to ride out the arm, and I want you to just drive the legs really hard to find a way to create speed without picking up the stroke rate. And the only way they're going to do that is by driving the legs really, really hard. You can also use kick swim sets where they go, for instance, 50 kick, 50 swim for 4 100s, and they descend those. The challenge there is you get the legs tired, you get the legs moving, you get the legs working, and then swimmers have to swim on the back end of that. One, a little bit of fatigue is actually going to help them find and feel their skills, but two, it's going to train them to maintain their legs as they go into that second 50. And finally, you can go swimming with drag socks. And again, that's obviously going to challenge the legs because they've got that extra resistance, and it's going to encourage them to execute really great skills while they're swimming because they're going to have that whipping action to the kick in order to swim effectively with the drag socks. And of course, you can combine these different strategies as well. You can go kick, stick drill, swim sets. You can add drag socks to any of that, and you can combine these in lots of different ways. But again, the idea here is to have an intermediate step between straight up kick work, straight up swimming work. We're going to do some swimming work where the legs are really overemphasized and really challenged. Next up is using resistance. And as we talked about with the drag socks, it has many benefits from a skill standpoint, from a strength standpoint, and from a fitness standpoint. And when you use resistance, you can resist the body. You can have swimmers kick and swim against resistance. So for instance, a parachute, power tower, stretch cord, something like that. Or you can actually resist the feet, whether using drag socks or fins, drag socks and fins, or shoes. And we can use these strategies with any of the different tools that we've talked about so far. So you can use vertical kicking, you can have them wear drag socks, you can have them hold a weight, or you can have them hold their hands above their head, which is going to increase the resistance as well. Kicking on their back, resist the body, resist the feet. Leg-driven swimming, resist the body, resist the feet. So lots of different ways to challenge them by using resistance. It's going to help them feel that pressure on the water. It's going to help them develop a more effective whip-like kick, and it's going to physically challenge them to develop the strength and the fitness to actually execute an effective kick for long periods of time at high speeds, and that's ultimately what they need to do in races. And for all the strategies we talked about so far, regardless of the context, focusing on performance is really important for driving change. If swimmers are executing the different strategies at a higher level, they're getting better at kicking. So can they vertical kick with more difficult hand positions? Can they vertical kick with load? Can they vertical kick with drag socks? Can they do it at high intensities for longer? Can they do more repetitions? Can they do more volume? Those are all ways to increase the challenge. And when they're actually kicking, when they're actually swimming, can they go faster? Can they hold that speed for longer? Can they do it with less rest? It's all about challenging them to improve their skills, improve their kicking over time. You can have them build, you can have them descend, you can have them negative split, you can have them hit certain speeds. It's all really effective at driving change because swimmers have to perform at a higher level. And in order to do that, they need to swim better and they need to sustain those skills for longer periods of time. You can also use pretty strict stroke counts during leg-driven swimming of any kind because that's going to force them to create speed, create performance without just using the arms to compensate. They have to find speed, they have to find change with the legs, and at a minimum, they have to maintain the equality of their legs if they want to go faster. So regardless of the strategy, asking for performance and expecting performance to improve over time is going to be critical for getting the changes that you're looking for. So here's a simple set to start to introduce some of these ideas, more of a skill perspective. So they're going to go 3 rounds through. They're going to go 4 times, 30 on, 30 off vertical kick. They're going to slowly increase the kick rate every 10 seconds, try to be a little bit better. And then after that vertical kicking, they're going to go right into a 50 flutter kick on the back, build a strong. They'll repeat that 4 times. So working on the vertical kick, keeping the legs really straight, and then trying to execute that on the 50 flutter kick on the back, working the up kick, working the kick behind the body. Again, increasing the speed on the 50 and increasing the speed on the vertical kicking. Then they're going to go right into 475s, 25 stick drill, and then a 50 swim. So they're going to overemphasize the legs the first 25, and then go right into the swim, and they're going to try to descend those 1 to 4 using the legs to make that happen. They'll go through the whole thing 3 times. So again, we're starting off with vertical kicking. We're going into flutter kick on the back. We're going into stick drill, and then we're going into regular freestyle. So transitioning from a pretty isolated skill all the way into what we want, which is swimming. And we're challenging them to increase the speed as they go, and we're giving them lots of opportunities to figure out how to put it all together. This set is more of an endurance focus. They're going to go 425s, flutter kick on the back with drag socks. They're going to descend 1 to 4 to fast to set things up. Then they're going to go 4 150s.
as 50 flutter kick on the back, 50 extreme stroke count, and then 50 free. They're going to descend those 1 to 4 to solid, so moving from kick to a kick-driven swim to regular swim. Again, descending those 1 to 4, and then they're going to back that up with 100 freestyle. They're going to negative split at the same stroke count. They got to use the legs to create speed the second half of each 100. We're going to repeat that same process, except we're going to drop a 150 as we go through, and they're going to go faster as they descend down. So we're setting it up with some speed work on the front end of it, using the drag socks and kicking on the back to work the up kick, and then we're transitioning to using the legs while swimming, and then really doing a great job of swimming. And as we go through the set, the goal is to try to get faster as they go and to keep working on improving that skill and improving and creating more speed. Here we have more of a speed set, so we're going to go 4 rounds through, 2 times 10 on, 50 off, vertical kicking with drag socks, and they're going to go 25 stick drill with drag socks, and they got to go that fast. And so to do that, they can't just move the arms faster, and they have to overcome the resistance of the socks, so they're going to have to create speed by really using the legs. Same thing on the next 25, it's now minimized stroke count and time with the drag socks, again, creating speed as they go. They got to do it with the legs, they got to stay long, they got to use the legs, and they got to overcome the drag socks. 25 freestyle fast here with drag socks. They don't have the stroke count restriction, but again, if they're not good with the legs, they're not effective, they're not going to go fast. 25 fast to finish it off. Just see what they can do, see how much speed they can create using the legs in context of swimming. On the odd rounds, we're going to add fins to the drag socks to create a ton of resistance on the feet. That's going to really help them develop some strength in the legs, which is what we want if we want to help them go fast. And on the even rounds, it's just going to be the drag socks. Again, moving from the drill, starting to integrate it into swimming, still creating some length while swimming, just letting them go fast, and then taking the socks off and letting them let it rip without any sort of challenge to the legs. It's a great way to develop speed and the skill of kicking at speed in the context of freestyle, which is what going fast is all about. If you want to help your swimmers go fast, you have to help them learn how to take their foot off the brake. I'm going to show you everything you need to know about how to improve horizontal alignment in freestyle. We're going to go over what it is, what it looks like, why it matters, the challenge of improving it, my favorite solutions for improving it, how to use those solutions, as well as some practical examples that you can implement today or you can use as inspiration to create your own sets. Let's dive in. So what is horizontal alignment? Well, to go fast in freestyle, swimmers need to move through the water as straight as possible. So the smaller the profile they create, the faster they're going to swim. Just like if you stick your hand out of the window in a car, when you have that smooth profile, the hand's going to slip right through as opposed to being buffered by all that resistance. And creating great horizontal alignment in freestyle can be difficult because of the structure of the body. There's a natural tendency for the legs to sink because the legs are a lot denser than the upper body, especially because the lungs are in the upper body. So one side's going to rise up a little bit, the other side's going to sink down. So now you have a profile, instead of moving straight through the water, we're at an angle, and that's going to create more resistance. To make matters worse, keeping the head low is going to be perceived as a threat by most swimmers, most humans. People like to see where they're going, so swimming with the head down, looking at the bottom of the pool as opposed to looking forward is pretty uncomfortable for a lot of people, especially at first. And we all like oxygen. We need it to survive, so when the head's a little bit lower in the water, that can be perceived as a little bit more of a threat because it's that much further that we have to move the head, move the body to breathe. So again, because of the natural tendencies for the structure of the body, as well as the threat of having the head in the water, horizontal alignment can be difficult to maintain in freestyle. These factors often lead to a situation where the head is up, the hips and legs are down, so instead of moving straight through, now we're moving at an angle, and that means more resistance, a poor profile, and compromised alignment. And the more resistance swimmers create, the more drag they create as they move through the water, that means less speed. They're literally hitting the brakes and slowing them down when they move through the water in anything but optimal alignment. And it doesn't take big changes to lead to big losses in speed. Even subtle distortions in alignment can be impactful, and because swimmers can never swim too fast, every little bit adds up, and we want to do everything we can to help swimmers be as aligned as possible as they move through the water. And so regardless if swimmers are swimming distance events or sprint events, the same positions, the same principles apply. So if we watch this swimmer here, you can see that the head is down, the hips are up at the surface, and even though he's rotating, he's changing his position, he's still maintaining that effective horizontal alignment in the water. The head is in alignment, the hips are in alignment, and the legs are up at the surface. This is a great example of maintaining great horizontal alignment as the swimmer moves through the water, keeping everything straight,
creating as little resistance as possible so that every time he creates propulsion, it's going to create more speed because he doesn't have his foot on the brakes. So a great example of awesome horizontal alignment. We can see the same thing with sprinters here. You can see that the head is down, the hips are up at the surface, and the feet are up at the surface. And so they're maintaining the same position even though they're swimming really, really, really fast. They're not allowing the body to incline excessively. They're keeping everything in line. The head's down, the hips are up at the surface, and that's going to allow them to move through the water with as little resistance as possible, allowing them to create as much speed as possible with each arm pull and each leg kick. So all the propulsion they create, as much of it as possible, is going to be used to create forward speed as opposed to overcoming unnecessary resistance. Again, it's not complicated. They just need to swim as straight as possible, but just because it's not complicated doesn't mean it's always easy for swimmers to do. And that's the challenge we have, is helping them learn how to do so. So we've alluded to it slightly, but I want to really emphasize, why does it matter to maintain great horizontal alignment? Well, the water is really dense, and it's going to do everything it can to slow swimmers down. That means less speed, and it means more effort. So not only are they going to swim slower, they're going to fatigue faster because they have to overcome more resistance in order to create the same amount of speed. Slower swimming and less efficient swimming is not a recipe for success. And drag gets worse the faster swimmers go. It's not linear, it's exponential. So as swimmers improve and they start swimming faster and faster, any alignment issues that they have are going to become more and more costly because they're going to create exponentially more drag than they would if swimmers were optimally aligned in the water. And so these errors begin to limit performance more and more and more, and so it becomes more and more important to get everything in line and get swimmers moving straight through the water. The other issue too is that swimmers can only become so fit and so powerful. They can only create so much force, they can only create so much propulsion, and they can only develop their metabolic systems to a certain level. So if they want to create more speed, they can build a bigger engine for a while, but at some point they're going to have to address the other side of the equation, which is reducing the amount of energy they need to achieve a certain speed. So if swimmers can improve their alignment, they're going to reduce their energy demands, which is instantly going to improve their fitness. And so if you can reduce the amount of energy that it takes to move at a certain speed by improving alignment, it's a lot easier to make swimming easier because it literally reduces how much energy is required to hit a certain speed. So improving horizontal alignment is a critical aspect of improving speed and improving performance in freestyle. So what's the challenge in improving horizontal alignment in freestyle? Well, the more we understand the problem, the easier it is to find solutions that are going to be really effective at improving this skill. So alignment mistakes are typically small and they're typically subtle. And so a lot of swimmers will really struggle to feel them. And if they can't feel these changes, they're not aware of them, it's going to be really difficult for them to change them. And simply telling swimmers they're making a mistake isn't always particularly helpful, especially when they can't feel that they're making that mistake. Another big challenge with alignment is that in many cases, we're not adding new movements, we're trying to get rid of unnecessary movements. There's not necessarily a specific movement that swimmers have to try to create. They're trying to not deviate from that ideal position. And so what they don't do matters, because if they don't deviate, then they're going to move through the water straight with great alignment. And for these reasons, to create change, we can't necessarily rely on instruction, because if they're not aware, they can't feel it, it doesn't really matter what we tell them. So we have to provide them with the opportunity to feel these changes, and once they have awareness, then they have the power and the ability to create change. So with an understanding of what we're trying to accomplish, an understanding of the challenges that are in front of us, it's time to dive into the solutions that are ultimately going to help swimmers go fast. We'll cover my preferred solutions for this skill, and then I'll provide you with a couple sets that show you how to use these strategies. So the first drill that I like to use is called the ball float to X float. So swimmers learn how to feel the support of their lungs, and then they can use that flotation to stay better aligned. So if swimmers aren't using the support of the lungs, they're going to have to compensate in order to create some sort of buoyancy, and that almost always is going to lead to disruptions in alignment. Once they can feel the lungs, they can learn how to lean into the lungs to reduce that tendency for the hips to sink, and that's going to encourage better alignment. Swimmers can also learn how to hold their legs up and create tension in the back of the legs to maintain an aligned position as they move through the water. And by moving the legs, swimmers can also experience different levels of tension. Finally, swimmers learn to manage their position dynamically. By moving back and forth between different positions, they're going to learn control, which is critical because managing alignment in freestyle is an active process where they have to maintain alignment, where there's a lot of other things going on with the arms, with the legs. So here's the exercise in action, and what they're going to do is they're going to get in a ball, they're going to float, and then they're going to expand out, and they're going to try to maintain their position on the surface of the water as well as they can. So they're going to have to lean into their lungs in order to support their hips, and they're going to have to create some tension in their legs in order to establish the heels up at the surface of the water. So they're learning how to maintain and manage an effective horizontal alignment and effective position in the water. So to reiterate what we just saw, it's important that swimmers learn to lean into the water, and it's also important that they learn how to create tension to lift the legs up to the surface. And most importantly, they have to dynamically manage those positions, moving back and forth between the positions and still maintaining a rock-solid alignment on the surface of the water. So the next activity that I like is elevator swim, and that's where swimmers start with the head up high and then progressively lower their head over the course of a 25 when they're swimming freestyle, or they can start low and end up high. And so where the head goes, the body follows, and it has a huge influence on the position of the rest of the body. When you get the head position right, body position tends to follow, and that tends to mean effective horizontal alignment. While it would be easy to tell each swimmer exactly where to put their head, one of the challenges, though, is that there isn't one right position for every swimmer. They have different lung sizes and location, so their buoyancy is going to be a little bit different. There are going to be different leg sizes and location is relevant because different swimmers have different muscular and body fat distribution patterns, and that's going to affect how the legs ride in the water independent of their length. Swimmers are also at different height, which changes everything as well. So we can help swimmers figure out their best position for them by allowing them and encouraging them to explore a range of different head positions, which is going to help them explore a range of different body positions. To help encourage that exploration, change it up. Have them go fast, have them go slow, use different training aids, use as many different variations as possible in order to provide them with as much information as possible to help them figure out what's going to work best for them. So here it is in action. Start with a really high head position and then gradually lower the head position, and you want to start excessively high and you want to end up excessively low. And you can reverse that starting with a low position and moving to a high position as well. And so the key is to explore a range of positions. And if you watch here, you can see that the hips will gradually come up as the head gets lower and lower. And it's not that lower is better, it's finding the right position that's going to be most effective for each swimmer, and that's what we're really trying to accomplish. So again, as the head position changes, so too will the body position. And when swimmers can learn to manage their head position, they're going to improve their body position. But they have to figure out what is going to be the most effective head position for them that allows them to move through the water with the best alignment. And by using the elevator swim drill, we're having them explore, and the more context we can have them explore, the more likely it is that they'll figure out and be able to feel which position is going to be most effective for them. A powerful strategy that can work with any activity is overspeed. So by swimming really fast, typically with fins, we can help swimmers become more aware of their alignment and help them improve their alignment. So the rationale: drag is subtle and it's hard to feel. And the faster swimmers go, the more drag they're going to create as they move through the water. The more drag they create, the more drag they can feel. That way, less obvious mistakes become more obvious. For instance, if a swimmer is swimming with the head too high, they may not be aware of it, but if they're swimming really fast, they're going to feel all that pressure on the chest, and that's going to allow them to make the change that they need in order to improve their alignment. So whenever you use overspeed, it makes any strategy that you're already using even more effective. So what do? You have swimmers go really fast and pay attention to the drag that they're creating. You can use the drills, you can even use added resistance on top of it, and the goal is to build awareness over time. If they can learn to be more aware of what they're feeling as they move through the water, if they become more aware of the resistance they're creating as they move through the water on different aspects of their body, then they can start to make those changes, and they can make those subtle changes that they otherwise wouldn't be able to feel, and those little changes are going to add up to big improvements in speed. The next strategy is using t-shirts and weight belts. And as we've discussed so far, a big challenge in improving alignment is the issue of feel. And so we have to use strategies that help swimmers better feel how they're moving through the water and how much resistance they're creating as they move through the water. So by using t-shirts and weight belts, we're pulling swimmers out of position where they have to work harder to maintain position, or we're creating more drag over certain areas of the body, and that's going to further challenge swimmers to overcome that drag. And then when we take the challenge away, it's going to be easier to be successful. They'll feel themselves slipping through the water, and that contrast, again, helps them become more aware of the drag that they're creating, both with the added gear and without the added gear. And just like with overspeed, just like with the ball float, just like with elevator swim, more awareness means more opportunity to change. And if we change the input, we change the sensory information that they're experiencing, that's going to change the output. That's going to change what they can do, how they can execute their swimming. What's important is not just to have swimmers swim with the added challenge. You want to ask for performance. You want speed, stroke count, stroke rate combinations in order to force swimmers to explore different ways to be successful. If you ask them to perform at higher and higher levels with the gear, they're going to have to find better and better solutions in order to accomplish those goals and achieve those objectives. You can use it with drills. You can use it with fatigue. Anything goes. You just want swimmers focused on maintaining their alignment as best as possible in spite of the added challenge. And then when the gear comes off, they really want to lock in and make sure they're executing at a really high level. Finally, you always want to ask for performance. Regardless of the skill you're trying to improve, asking for performance is a key aspect of driving better skills. You can use stroke counts, you can use stroke rates, you can use speed, and you can use a combination of all three. The key is you're asking for better performances and you're encouraging swimmers to explore how to achieve those performances via better skills. In the context of improving horizontal alignment, you can do it in one of two ways. You can use the sensory activities and then perform with regular freestyle. So for instance, you do 425s elevator swim. That helps them get a feel for their position. And then you go 425s freestyle, minimize stroke count and time. Of course, you can do it in any sort of set, any sort of context. The second strategy is perform during the sensory activities and then perform during freestyle as well. So 425s freestyle with fins, minimize stroke count and time, and they're going to do ball float to X float before each 25 so they get a feel for what they're doing, and then they're going to try to be fast and efficient, maintaining great alignment during those 25s. And then in the second 425s, then they're just going to do it straight up freestyle, again, minimizing stroke count and time to try to perform. So two options, they both work really well. It just depends on what you want to achieve. Regardless, ask for performance and swimmers will find a way to perform. And when you're doing so in the context of improving horizontal alignment and freestyle, that's the skill that's going to get better. So here's the first set to show some of these solutions in action. They're going to go 450s, 25 elevator swim, 25 freestyle. The odds, the elevator goes from low to high. The evens, it goes from high to low. 75 freestyle solid effort, trying to have that same great alignment, and then 25 freestyle strong effort. So this is more of a skill-focused set. There's not a huge amount of pressure on performances or fatigue or speed. Those 425s are going to figure out which position is going to work best for them, and then they're going to perform during those 75s and 25s. And as they go through, they're going to try to go faster on the regular freestyle, and on the 50s, they're going to build each 25, and then they're going to descend the 50s 1 to 4 on the last round. That added change in speed is going to encourage them to swim differently. They'll get a little bit more sensory information, and they can figure out a better way to execute with great head position. And lastly, before each repetition, they're going to go 5 times ball float to X float, so they get a feel for how to maintain that position in the water, how to use their lungs, use their legs to stay aligned, and then they'll try to carry those skills over into each of the swims. So a great way to develop skills while keeping them moving a little bit. This set is a little bit more of an endurance focus, so they're going to go 425s, odds elevator swim with a weight belt. They're going to descend those across the rounds, and then the evens are freestyle with a weight belt, minimize stroke count and time. So they'll do that before each round, and then they'll do some hundreds. So they're going to descend at the same stroke count. They're going to drop a rep and go faster each round. So what we're trying to accomplish here is the weight belt is going to pull swimmers out of alignment, and that's going to magnify what they feel during the elevator swim, and then they've got to execute during the regular freestyle and make sure that they still stay in great alignment. And then they're going to stay long, try to create some speed on those hundreds, and try to get better as they go. So they're experiencing a pretty big challenge on those 25s, and then on the hundreds, they're going to try to execute, and they're going to try to perform at higher and higher levels, staying long, staying efficient, and maintaining better alignment as they do so in order to create more speed. So we're using drills, we're using the resistance strategy, and then we're also challenging swimmers to perform in this set. If you don't have weight belts, you can use t-shirts, you can use shorts, something that's going to challenge their position in the water and will also create more drag on their body as they move through the water. Last set is more of a speed set, and we're going to use the overspeed strategy here. So before each swim, they're going to perform some ball float to X float repetitions, and that's going to help them get locked in with their alignment. And they're going to go 2 rounds through this. They'll go 325s with fins as fast as possible at 1.0 seconds per cycle. You can use stroke counts as well. The idea is to create some speed and length. Then they're going to go 25 freestyle without fins. And then they're going to go 2 and 1, and then 1 and 1, but they're going to drop the rate, and they're going to go 2 rounds through this. So they're going to be swimming pretty fast here, and that's going to allow them to feel more resistance. And by doing the exercise before each one, they're going to have a feel for how to maintain great alignment, and they're going to try to create as much speed as they can without picking up the stroke rate. And the better aligned they are, the more speed they're going to be able to create. And by performing the drill before each swim, they're going to have more awareness of what they need to do during those faster repetitions. So horizontal alignment is a key skill in freestyle. The more swimmers can move straight through the water, the less resistance they'll create, and that means more speed for less effort. The challenge with improving alignment is that it's not necessarily a concrete skill that swimmers have to execute, and it can be difficult for them to feel. So we have to provide them with strategies that allow them to feel how much resistance they're creating as a result of less than optimal alignment, and then challenge them to change that position in order to create performances and improve their skills. And when they can do that, they're going to improve their alignment, and that means they're going to swim faster. If you want more information like this, be sure to subscribe, and I'll continue to bring you the content that helps you help your swimmers get faster. If swimmers aren't swimming straight, it's going to be really difficult for them to swim fast. And unfortunately, helping swimmers learn to swim straight is not always that easy. There's multiple components that can go wrong, and there's multiple reasons that those components can go wrong. But if you can develop the skills to help swimmers learn to swim straight, they're almost always going to swim faster. We're going to learn everything about lateral alignment in freestyle. We're going to learn why it's so important. We're going to learn what it is. We're going to go over what it looks like. We're going to go over the challenges of improving lateral alignment, and then we're going to go through solutions in order to help swimmers learn to improve their lateral alignment as quickly and as easily as possible. And we'll even go through some sets that show you how to put these ideas into practice. Let's check it out. So why does lateral alignment matter? 3 big reasons that are all really important. First of all, side-to-side motion is going to expand the body profile. So if swimmers are moving side to side, that's going to create a lot more resistance, a lot more drag, and the more resistance they create, the more drag they create, the less speed they're going to create. So if we can get swimmers going straight through the water, they're going to have a lot tighter body profile, and that means they're going to create a lot less resistance, which means they're going to go a whole lot faster. Side-to-side motion is also going to move the arms out of position. So if the body is moving side to side, the head's moving side to side, guess what? The arms are moving side to side as well. It's a lot more difficult to set up the stroke if the arms are moving side to side, if they're not entering in the right place, and it's a lot more difficult to actually execute the stroke if the body's moving side to side as well. And that's for 2 different reasons. 1, the arms are going to be out of position, but 2, the arms are also going to have to compensate for losses of body position to try to keep everything stable and to try to keep everything balanced. And so if the alignment's really bad from side to side, the hips are moving from side to side, the head's moving, the shoulders are moving, it's going to be so much more difficult to create propulsion because the arms aren't going to be in the right position, and they're going to be doing so much work to try to stabilize everything to help swimmers continue to move forward. Not good. Extra motion also tends to mean the arms are going to move over a longer range of motion because they're not taking the most direct path, and that means it's going to take more time to execute those skills. The more time it takes, the lower the stroke rate. The lower the stroke rate, the less speed. And of course, it's not a lower stroke rate because it's being more effective. It's one thing if the stroke rate gets slower because swimmers are holding more water, but they're actually holding less water and they're spending more time doing useless movements. It's going to artificially slow the stroke rate. There's no benefit to that, so that definitely means less speed. So what is great lateral alignment? What do swimmers have to do well in order to create as little resistance as possible and to keep everything moving forward? The big word here is straight. The head and the body need to move straight through the water. The head's not moving, it's relatively still, even through the breath. So what you see sometimes is swimmers are swimming straight, they take that breath, it pulls to the side, and they get out of alignment. There's no side-to-side motion from the shoulders or the hips. Again, everything is moving straight through the water. Now, the body, the shoulders, the hips, they're going to move, but it's more of a rotational movement as opposed to a bending movement. If the swimmers are moving like this, they're not creating that side-to-side motion. If they're bending side to side, they are creating that side-to-side motion, which is going to create all the problems we just talked about. A big aspect of that is effective arm recoveries. If swimmers aren't rotating well, or they're recovering the arms really far out to the side, that's going to start them swinging back and forth, and that's going to create all sorts of problems in terms of the alignment. It's really difficult to keep everything straight, to keep the body moving forwards if the arm recoveries are really low, really straight, and that torque that they're creating is going to push swimmers out of alignment. It's not necessarily that straight arm swimming is bad, but swimmers need to be able to control their torso when they do that, and if the arm recovery is really, really low, it's much more difficult to do so. Finally, swimmers can be doing everything perfect until they breathe, and then the lateral alignment can go right out the window. So that breath needs to be really straight, it needs to be fast. The more it's being pulled to the side and the more prolonged it is, the more likely it is that swimmers are going to lose their alignment through the breath.
And so when all races other than a 50, swimmers are going to have to breathe, so that breath needs to be good, it needs to be straight, it needs to be fast, and that'll prevent swimmers from losing their alignment through the breath. So we'll take a look at an example here of a swimmer doing it really well, and as you can see, she's rotating, and those shoulders are moving up and down, but they're not moving side to side, and that's really important. And just as importantly, if you watch the breath, it's tight, it's fast, and she's not pulling to the side. Her body position, her alignment doesn't change at all when she takes that breath. And if you watch the arm recoveries, they're entering right in front of the shoulder, they're entering straight forward, and that's again preventing her from going side to side. Everything's moving forward, which is carrying her forward and keeping her drag profile really low. So tight breath, good rotation, direct arm recoveries, direct pulls. There's no side to side motion, and so she's going to have no wasted motion, so stroke rate should be good. The arms aren't moving side to side, so the pull should be good, and her body's not moving side to side, so her alignment should be good. She's not creating unnecessary resistance as she moves forward. Another example here of a swimmer swimming straight through. Again, everything's moving forward, everything's staying tight, the body's not moving side to side. So he's being really effective with keeping everything moving forward. See it here. Again, there's no side-to-side motion. The hips aren't moving side to side. The arms are moving straight forward, and he's being really tight with the breath too. So another good example of keeping everything straight, swimming straight forward, swimming straight through, rather than going side to side and causing all sorts of problems like we just discussed. So what are the challenges? First of all, breathing is probably the biggest cause of loss of lateral alignment. And unfortunately, swimmers have to breathe, and they're going to do whatever it takes to breathe. They're going to get air, and they're not going to give that up, because if they do, they obviously have much bigger problems than swimming slow. So if the breath is never addressed, and the breath can be challenging to improve, if that breath is never addressed, it's going to be really difficult to get everything locked in with alignment, because even if the stroke itself is picture perfect, as soon as swimmers breathe, it's going to go all out the window. And so it's critical to make sure that the breath gets locked in and the breath is performed well. Another issue related to breathing is that many times freestyle is learned in panic mode. So when swimmers are young, they're still kind of figuring out just how to stay afloat. They're just trying to get air, and they're taught freestyle on that background. So swimmers are really struggling just to stay on the surface of the water, and they're using most of their action to try to do that, and they're trying to add in the skills of freestyle. When that happens, you usually get poor breathing mechanics because swimmers aren't comfortable and they're really desperate for air. You get poor arm recovery mechanics because, again, the breath is going to mess that up. They're not feeling comfortable in the water. They're not going to be able to just recover the arms smoothly and effortlessly. That's going to be a struggle. And that stuff tends to stick with swimmers even when they finally get relaxed in the water, because they've learned those skills when, for a lack of a better term, they've learned it in panic mode. Finally, it's an awareness issue. If someone's been swimming for 5 or 6 years, whatever they're doing, they think is normal and they think it's right. And so they can't even feel that their head is moving all over the place. They think it's in exactly the right place. They can't feel that their body is moving all over the place. They think it's in the exact right place. And so they can't feel these skills. And if they're not aware of it, they can't tell that they're doing these things. It's going to be very difficult to change them. If a swimmer thinks their head is still and it's actually moving all over the place, if you tell them that it needs to stay still, they think they're already doing that. And no swimmer is actively trying to execute skills with their head moving all over the place. So telling them that isn't going to do much unless they can feel it. And so until swimmers can feel that they're making these mistakes, it's going to be very difficult to change them. So in terms of solutions, the challenges we face inform us what we need to do. We have to help swimmers improve their breath. We have to unlearn the skills that they've learned in panic mode. We got to clean up the recoveries. We also have to help them feel that their body is moving all over the place, that their head is moving all over the place, make them aware of that. And when we can do that, it's going to be a lot easier for them to change, because now they understand what's happening. They understand the disconnect between what they're feeling and what they think they're doing. And that makes it much easier to get changed, much easier to help them progress and allow them to learn the skill of lateral alignment. Where the head goes, the body is going to follow. So if the head's moving all over the place, it's going to be impossible to fix the rest of the stroke to improve lateral alignment throughout the rest of the stroke. If we can get that head still, it's going to be much easier to help swimmers learn every other aspect of lateral alignment. One of my favorite ways to do that is paddle cap freestyle. So you're just going to have them put a paddle on their head and then swim forward. And so the first step is to do it without breathing. That's going to be a lot easier for them to accomplish, and all they have to do is move forward through the water without moving their head. At first, it may be some really bad version of freestyle that allows them to do that, depending on how bad the problem is. That's fine. Just get them to move forward through the water with the head still. independent of the breath. You may even have to start with kicking if they're really, really, really struggling. Start slow, get it done with kicking, get it done with swimming, and then you can add some speed to it. You got to be patient with this. It may take some time, but of course, if they can't figure out how to keep the head still, anything else we do is more or less going to be a waste of time, because if that head's moving, everything else is going to be a problem. So just get them able to move down the pool, keeping everything in line, keeping everything still, and keeping the paddle on their head. When they can do that, then you can add the breathing. And so use whatever breathing pattern is easiest for them. Even if it's just taking 2 breaths to 25, it doesn't really matter. Just get them to be successful with any breathing pattern, and then you can start adding more complex breathing patterns. You can start having them go on both sides. You can work the weak side, and then you can work the strong side. You can have them go bilateral breathing, so they're breathing every 3 or breathing every 5. That's going to make it more difficult when they're moving the head in lots of different ways to keep the paddle on. When they're more successful with that, then you can start adding speed as well. And so for some swimmers that really struggle with this, you can have them start with mini breaths. And what that is they're literally just going to turn the head just a little bit. They're not actually going to get air, but they're just going to practice turning the head. And then over time, they can turn the head more and more and more and more until they can finally learn to turn the head all the way and get an actual breath. If they can get better at this skill, if they can get better at this drill, it's going to infinitely improve their ability to keep the head still, which means it's going to make their lateral alignment a whole lot better. And what's really effective about this drill is that it gives instant feedback to swimmers. If the paddle comes off, they moved it, and they don't have to rely on you to tell them what to do or how to do it. They're going to learn a lot faster, a lot more effectively, because the paddle is going to give them feedback all the time, and it's going to give them feedback immediately. So this is pretty straightforward, nothing too complicated. They just got to swim forward with the paddle on their head. And again, they're obviously breathing at this case. You can start without breathing, and you can start with simple breathing patterns. You can start with kicking. Just get that head staying still, and then progress to more challenging versions so that they can get to the point where they can execute a solid breath. And hopefully they can even do that with some speed. When they get to that point, their lateral alignment is pretty likely going to be spot on. And if there are some other issues, it's going to be a lot easier to clean those up once that head is still. Next up is underwater recovery. So as I mentioned earlier, a lot of times swimmers have really odd arm recoveries that are coming in across their body. They're swinging way out to the side, and that's going to throw off alignment to a really great extent. And so if swimmers can learn to recover the arms directly, it's going to be a lot more effective at keeping everything moving forward. We watched our videos from earlier. Swimmers are entering right in front of their body, and they're moving the arms straight, and that's going to allow the body to stay straight. So that's what we're working on here. And by recovering the arms under the water, it makes it a lot simpler. Swimmers can focus on being really direct with the arm recoveries. They're going to enter them straight forward, and then they can pull straight back. For swimmers that struggle with their arm recoveries, this simplified version can help them really work on it, and they're going to be able to feel how they can rotate as opposed to going side to side, because it's very difficult to rotate. The arm recoveries are causing problems. This allows swimmers to feel that, so they can rotate with the arm as it moves forward rather than bending side to side, which is going to cause all the problems that we've discussed so far in terms of lateral alignment. Recovering the arms under the water, it's a lot simpler, and then swimmers can make those arm recoveries direct. They can learn how to rotate, they can learn how to control their alignment, and once they can feel it, once they can execute it correctly, it's going to be easier to do it when they're actually swimming freestyle. So underwater recovery is exactly what it sounds like. You're just going to have swimmers recover the arms under the water. And the biggest thing is to focus on recovering those arms straight forward and then pulling straight back so that everything is extremely direct as opposed to moving side to side. If you watch here, you can see how the arms are recovering really directly. There's zero side to side motion with the body, and he's being really effective at keeping everything in line. Head's not moving, body's not moving, everything is straight forward, straight back, extremely effective. Once swimmers get the hang of underwater recovery, it can be sometimes a challenge to transition that right into regular freestyle. And so that's what we'll use over-under freestyle. That's where one arm is recovering over the water, one arm is recovering under the water. So they still get that feedback of recovering straight forward under the water, and then with the other arm, they can try to get that same feeling of recovering straight forward and entering directly in front of the head. It's a great transition to regular freestyle. They get a reminder of that direct recovery, and it also challenges them on one arm. So it's a little bit more of a manageable challenge that allows swimmers to be successful, can really lock in their alignment still without having to make it happen during full stroke swimming. It also allows you to isolate one side versus the other, because you might find that one side, say the left side, is a little bit more effective than the right side, and then you can work on that by focusing more on recovering one arm under the water as opposed to the other arm under the water. So as with underwater recovery, we're going to go one arm over, one arm under, And as you can see, it's going to be the same basic pattern. He's going to have one arm recovering under, one arm over, and he's going to be really direct with those arm recoveries, entering straight forward and then pulling straight back. So it's a really good transition from underwater recovery to full stroke swimming with both arms recovering over the water. Swimmers are struggling, you can focus on one arm versus the other to really isolate that arm that's struggling to recover directly forward and get a little bit more practice prior to implementing it in regular freestyle. Now we can also change the hands in order to challenge lateral alignment as well. So we can create resistance through the recovery by having swimmers hold a small number of coins or some other really small weight in the hands, or you can have them put drag socks on their arms. This is going to make it more difficult to recover the arm, and they're going to have to choose a more direct arm path. If they're swinging it really low and really wide, that's going to be a lot more difficult when they've got the extra weight in the hand or that extra resistance that's getting pulled out of the water out to the side when they finish the stroke on the drag socks. So in both cases, it's going to encourage swimmers to execute a more direct arm recovery, because moving the arms to the side or swinging them out to the side is going to be a lot more difficult with that added resistance. Another strategy is to close the hands when we're doing any of the drills we've discussed previously. And so a lot of times when swimmers lose their alignment, they kind of scull a little bit in order to stabilize themselves. If they've got the fist closed, they can't make that happen. So if we're doing paddle cap freestyle and they're really sculling to order to prevent their body from moving all over the place, it can't happen with closed fists. So they're going to have to be a lot more stable, a lot more aligned, a lot more direct with their whole body, because they can't use the arms to compensate. So it just takes the drills that they're already using and makes them that much more effective, because they can't cheat. If they lose their alignment at all, they're going to really know it and they're going to really feel it. And that's going to be that feedback mechanism that we talked about. They don't have awareness. This can help them become more aware of when they're losing their alignment. And it gives them the tools to learn how to fix it. Finally, with all these drills, all these strategies, you can challenge the skills. You can add speed, you can have them build it, you can have them descend it, you can have them hit various speeds from slow to pretty fast. For instance, paddle cap freestyle, executing it well is one thing. Doing it building, doing it descending, that's another layer of challenge which swimmers want to be able to do. They can execute really great alignment when they're swimming slow, but they can't do it fast. Well, that's not going to do us much good, because they have to actually be able to do it in a race in order for it to matter. So we have to challenge them a little bit with some speed as well. You can also have them go really high stroke count, really low stroke count, really high stroke rate, really low stroke rate. You can have them alternate between the two. Again, that's going to change their timing. It's going to force them to be really patient between strokes if the counts and rates are low. They'll also get through it really fast if the counts and rates are high. And both of those can be challenging to maintain alignment, but they challenge swimmers in different ways, in both cases in relevant ways. You can also use training aids. We've talked about the hand postures like closed fist. You can also have them hold upside down paddles or any other similar position. You can use resistance. That's going to make it more difficult because they're going to get pulled out of alignment by the resistance. And you can combine all these strategies. So the idea here is, rather than just doing the drills, train the drills, put them under pressure so that swimmers have to execute these skills in difficult situations. If they can execute the skills in difficult situations, if they can execute the drills in difficult situations, it's going to make it a lot more likely that they're going to be able to do it in a race when they're going fast and they're experiencing a ton of fatigue. Let's take a look at a couple sets to help swimmers learn to improve lateral alignment. So 3 rounds through this, they're going to go 625. So they're going to go 25 paddle cap freestyle with no breath, then 25 underwater recovery and paddle cap freestyle. So the arm recoveries are going to be taken out of that. Should be a little bit easier to keep the paddle on, and then a 25 paddle cap freestyle. First 3 25s are with closed fists. So the first round of those is with closed fists, and then the second round of the 3 25s is with open hands. And so it's going to make it a lot more difficult, those first 3, but they should be able to lock it in on the second 3. Then they're going to 100 freestyle, breathe every 2, every 3 by 25. So they're challenged to use a different breathing pattern. And then we're going to work on the arm recoveries a little bit more directly. So 25 underwater recovery plus 25 freestyle. Whatever they feel, that directness in the underwater recovery, try to make it happen with the freestyle. And then a 50-25 over under, 25 freestyle, go with one arm. And then the next 50, it's the same thing, but go with the other arm. And the goal here is to get them to try to increase the effort each round. So they're putting more into it each round. They're trying to execute at a higher level. It's not so much about the speed. It's about trying to execute the skills better and better. And so we're working on the breath, working on the head staying stable, and we're attacking the arm recoveries all in this set. Next set is a little bit more of an endurance set. It's set up like an active rest set. If you're familiar with that concept, everything should be on relatively tight intervals here. And they're going to descend down that first piece, and then they're going to go right into an easy swim. But that easy swim has to be drill, and it has to be executed really well. So what we're doing is we're challenging swimmers to execute the skills that we want when they're experiencing a little bit of fatigue. not only does that challenge those skills themselves, but it also reminds swimmers of what they need to do when they move back into the next stronger effort. So the first piece, 200 freestyle, descend 1 to 3 to solid, and then a 50 paddle cap freestyle. The next one is 150s, but they're going to go faster, and they're going to go underwater recovery as their drill. The next one's hundreds, they're going to go even faster, and they're going back to paddle cap freestyle. And the last one, they're going to go just 50s, and they're going the best effort there, and they're going to go underwater recovery as well for that fourth round. So the drills are going to be challenged under pressure, and they're going to serve as a reminder to help swimmers stay on track during those longer swims. So we have more of a speed set here. We're going to go 3 rounds through. They're going to go 25 paddle cap freestyle, build to fast. Then they're going to go 25 freestyle, minimize stroke count and time. And they're going to switch between a drill that's always build to fast and then freestyle, minimize stroke count and time. So what we're working on here is we're executing those drills at higher and higher speeds, and then swimmers are practicing swimming really fast, really efficient on the regular freestyle. The drills go paddle cap freestyle, underwater recovery, over under freestyle on the other arm, and then we'll finish it off with a 25 freestyle fast. Now in round 1, they're going to go closed fist on the drills, so they're going to really lock in, make sure they're being really aligned. And then on round 2, they're going to go fins, so they have to execute everything at faster speeds when they're moving through the water faster. They still have to make sure that everything stays lined up. And then the last round is going to be no equipment. So here, the emphasis, the focus is really on going faster with these skills, making it happen during the drills, and then really executing during the regular full stroke swimming. And so instead of just doing straight up speed work, we're doing it in a way that really puts more emphasis on this skill, allows swimmers to build some length at speed as well, and therefore further challenge their skills while building speed and developing the ability to execute these skills at speed.
There are a lot of swimmers that have pretty good freestyles until they have to breathe. And unfortunately, unless they're an expert at the 50, swimmers are going to have to breathe. So when swimmers struggle with their breathing and it's killing their speed, the only way they can take the next step is learn how to breathe more effectively. Let's dive into how to make that happen. Breathing is an absolutely critical skill in freestyle. More than just about any stroke, poor breathing can really disrupt the rhythm, the timing, the alignment, and the propulsion that's created during freestyle. And if swimmers have a poor breath, it can wreck an otherwise effective stroke. And because swimmers need to breathe in every event other than the 50, they have to figure out how to breathe effectively if they want to swim fast. So why does breathing matter? Well, it affects the 3 primary skills that lead to fast swimming. It negatively affects alignment, it negatively affects propulsion, and it negatively affects timing. So from an alignment perspective, if you move the head, the body's going to react. So if the head lifts up, the hips are going to drop. The head moves to the side, the hips are going to go the other way. And so all of a sudden, if that head's moving around when swimmers are breathing, they're either going to be swimming at an angle or they're going to be bouncing up and down from a horizontal perspective. And from a lateral perspective, they're going to be going side to side. And the more swimmers deviate from moving straight forward, the more resistance they create. The more resistance they create, the slower they go. But it's not just an alignment problem. It's also a propulsion problem. If the head pulls out of line, well, guess what? The shoulders are going to be out of line. And if the shoulders are out of position, it's going to be a lot harder for swimmers to pull effectively. Everything needs to be lined up so that swimmers can drop the arm in right where it needs to be and pull back. So it's really difficult to execute effective pulling mechanics if the shoulders aren't in the right position to allow swimmers to put their arms in the right position and then create force with the strongest muscles of the body. So if the breathing's pulling the body offline, the pull is going to be affected just as much as alignment's going to be effective. Lastly, it becomes a timing issue as well. And so fast swimming is all about precision and the right thing happening at the right time. If the head's moving more than it needs to during the breath, it's going to take more time. If swimmers are just slow with the breath, it's going to take more time. And so one of 2 things are going to happen. Swimmers are going to either lose effective stroke timing, which is definitely not going to help them swim fast, or they'll be able to maintain effective stroke timing, but only by slowing everything down. And if it takes longer to perform the same skills, that means their stroke rate's going to be lower, and it's going to be unnecessarily lower, which means they're going to swim slower than they otherwise could. So for these reasons, breathing is really important. If breathing's not good, swimmers are going to slow down because they negatively impact their alignment. Up goes resistance. Swimmers are going to slow down because they don't create enough propulsion. Down goes speed, and the timing's either going to be off, which is going to make it harder to create propulsion and maintain alignment, or timing might be maintained, but the longer that breath takes, the longer the stroke cycle takes, which is also going to slow swimmers down. So what is effective breathing? While it may be difficult for swimmers to do, effective breathing is ultimately simple, at least from a conceptual standpoint. The breath needs to be low, the breath needs to be straight, and the breath needs to be fast. With a low breath, the head should lift as little as possible. And the more the head lifts, the more the hips are going to go down. That means more resistance. That means less speed. The breath also needs to be straight in that the head shouldn't pull to the side. It should rotate in order to get the mouth clear so that swimmers can breathe. And the more the head pulls to the side, the bigger the disruption of alignment, the more side-to-side swimming that you'll see. And when the breath is high and when the breath is not straight, the more that happens, the more that the arms are going to have to compensate because the head's offline. Swimmers are going to be less stable and they're going to have to use their arms to kind of brace, compensate to make sure that they don't lose their balance. If their arms are compensating, they're not creating propulsion, and that's no good. Lastly, the breath also needs to be fast. And so no matter what, no matter how great that breath is, it's going to disrupt the stroke a little bit. And that's why swimmers tend to not breathe in a 50. And so swimmers have to keep the breath as fast as possible because the longer it takes, the bigger the impact there's going to be. And so even if swimmers are breathing really, really well, it needs to be fast to minimize the impact. And if swimmers are breathing really poorly, it probably needs to be even faster because they need to minimize the amount of time that they're executing poor skills. So now let's take a look at it in action. And this is probably one of the best breaths I've seen. There's no disruption of the rhythm of the stroke. There's no lifting of the head. There's no pulling it to the side. And man, that breath is fast. And so this is a really good example of a breath executed really well because there's very little disruption to the stroke. There's no up and down motion. There's no side to side motion. And that breath is fast. And so the rhythm and timing of the stroke is not being disrupted. And so the faster swimmers can breathe, the more effective they're going to be at maintaining their skills, even when they do breathe. So we'll take a look at it with a different swimmer from a different angle. And what you can see is that head is not lifting up. There's no side-to-side motion. So if there was a steel rod coming right through her spine, that head stays right on that steel rod. It just turns. It doesn't lift. It doesn't pull to the side. It's right exactly where it needs to be. And there's no disruption of alignment. The pulls are not being affected at all. And her breath is fast. So another really good example, maybe not quite as aggressive as that previous example in terms of the speed of the breath, but the same impact in that there's very little disruption of the stroke, and that's what allows her to go fast. And that is a huge advantage in terms of going fast. So why is improving the breath difficult? What's the challenge? Well, first of all, humans want air, and they're going to do whatever they need to do to get it. They do not care about swimming fast nearly as much as they care about staying alive. And so they're going to choose movements, they're going to choose motions that ensure they get a good breath, even if that compromises their speed by a couple tenths of a second. And so they're going to breathe in ways that ensure that they get air into their mouth as opposed to water. And the easiest way to do that is to lift up, to pull the head to the side to ensure that it's a safe breath. So to help swimmers breathe more effectively and ensure that they get air, we have to help them find strategies that allow them to feel safe with a more aggressive breath and doesn't increase the likelihood that they're going to inhale water, which is obviously going to be a big problem. The second issue is the quality of the feedback. In most cases, they've been breathing during freestyle for a very long time. The older the swimmer, the more likely that's the case. So they can't necessarily feel what they're doing. What feels right to them may not be right, but that's what feels normal. And anything different from that is going to feel wrong. It's going to feel bad. And they can't necessarily perceive that what they're doing isn't that effective. And so as a result, they don't understand necessarily what they do because they're very used to swimming a certain way, and that's what feels right, that's what feels good. And if they can't feel it, they can't understand it, they're not going to be able to create change, they're not going to be able to fix it. And lastly, improving the breath is actually about doing less. And so it's a lot harder to move less. And so from a conceptual standpoint, independent of swimming, trying to get people to do less with their movement is pretty counterintuitive, and it's a little bit harder for them to conceptualize. So we have to help swimmers understand what it's like to have a smaller, cleaner breath, and that can be pretty counterintuitive to most swimmers. So when it comes to solutions, we have to make sure that swimmers are comfortable breathing and they're not feel like they're under threat. And if they've been swimming a long time, they probably don't necessarily feel those threats anymore. However, if they learned the skill when they were young and when they were concerned about breathing, that skill may still have remnants of that fear because that's the state that they learned it in. So we have to undo that. We're going to have to help them understand there's a different way of breathing because you are comfortable in the water, because you are safe, because you don't need to worry about choking on water. And to do that, we have to help them feel more effective ways to breathe, and we have to help them become more aware of how their breath is impacting their stroke and how they're breathing so that they can better perceive, better understand new opportunities to breathe and help them find ways to breathe lower, straighter, and faster. Ground zero for improving breathing is managing air. So swimmers have to be comfortable in the water to execute effective breathing. There's two main skills here. They have to understand how to exchange air. They have to understand how to float. And so to help them learn how to exchange air, simple bobbing exercises can be really good where they're focusing on inhaling and exhaling with rhythm. You can do it in a lot of different ways. And for more advanced swimmers, it may not be necessary, but especially at the early stages of learning, it can be really important for swimmers to understand how to inhale when the head's out of the water and exhale when the head is in the water, and do so in a fluid rhythm and control their breathing rather than just breathing whenever they want. Secondly, different floating exercises can be really effective. Starting with a ball float can be really useful for helping swimmers understand how the lungs support them and hold them in the water, allows them to be comfortable. And then by expanding into an X position, they can learn how to control their limbs and still manage their body position. There are a lot of different floating options that you can use, just as there's different variations of bobbing options. All of them can be really useful. You just want to challenge swimmers in different ways so that they get good at exchanging their air, and when the air is in their lungs, they can use that air to manage their position and be more comfortable, more stable, more relaxed in the water. So this is a super simple bobbing exercise. All they do is exhale under the water, inhale when the head comes above the water. And so this can be done in deeper water, can be done in shallower water. You can have swimmers hold their hands on the side of the pool to get a little bit more support. It's all about just patient, relaxed, rhythmic air exchange. Nothing fancy, but for swimmers that don't have that skill, it can make a huge difference. Here we have the ball float to X float, and so during the ball float, they're going to rest at the surface of the water, and they're going to rest at the surface comfortably, and then they just expand out into an X position, and they have to learn how to press into the water. They have to learn how to create tension with the backs of their legs to maintain a stable and effective position at the surface of the water. You can use lots of different letters. You can use lots of different positions. They're all challenge swimmers in different ways. The idea is to help them find ways to support themselves, be stable, be comfortable in the water, and then manage their position in order to stay relaxed on the surface of the water. So with paddle cap freestyle, swimmers are going to swim with a paddle on their head. And when they breathe, if they lift the head, they pull the head to the side, the paddle is going to come off. And so it's a really powerful strategy because it provides immediate feedback. As soon as swimmers make a mistake, that paddle's coming off. And as soon as swimmers do it well, that paddle's staying on. And it's relevant feedback. It gives them feedback about the skill that you're trying to improve. And it's very clear feedback. The paddle either stays on or it comes off. And so by providing them with immediate, relevant, and clear feedback, that's going to be really effective for learning because swimmers figure out really quickly what works and what doesn't. It's also extremely simple. It's extremely effective. The task does the teaching for you. So whether you have one swimmer in the pool or 30, they can all do the same thing at the same time. And that paddle is going to give them feedback as to whether they're breathing effectively or not. And it's going to give them immediate feedback as to whether they're breathing effectively or not. So you can coach just as well with 30 swimmers as compared to one swimmer. And that means you can get a lot more change in a lot less time. So here it is in action. Straightforward, simple. Low breath, straight breath, the paddle stays on. High breath, wide breath, the paddle comes off. And so again, it's really effective at helping swimmers understand effective breathing mechanics. And if they're not effective, they're lifting up, they're pulling to the side, that paddle's coming off, and they'll know it right away. And that encourages them to do something different to create a change so that that paddle stays on. Next up is stroke and roll. And so some swimmers really struggle with lifting the head. And so with this activity, we're going to have them roll to the breath, exaggerate the roll. There's zero lifting of the head, and that can really help them understand the rotational aspect of the breath. So what we'll have them do here is after a certain number of strokes, they're going to roll completely onto the back when they breathe. And that exaggerated movement is going to allow them to feel the rotation that comes with breathing. The goal here is to help swimmers feel that rotational component. And once they can feel it and understand it, the goal is then to work it into regular freestyle. So if swimmers are struggling with lifting rather than rotating, it can be a really effective tool to encourage them to swim differently. So if we see here, he's going to take a couple strokes and he's going to roll right onto his back. And so as you saw, there's no lifting of the head. Yeah, it's an exaggerated rotation, more than he would do, but it allows him to understand how to rotate to breathe as opposed to lift to breathe. And when they do it, when they're actually swimming, it's going to be a much smaller motion, but it allows them again to focus on the feeling of rotation rather than lifting, and they can start to incorporate that into their regular swimming. We talked about earlier about it's important to help them get a feel for what they need to do. This is a strategy that can help them get a feel for the rotation as opposed to just lifting the head. So as we've talked about, the sensory aspect is really important. And swimmers can't change what they can't feel. And so this is where we can use a snorkel strategically to help them do so. So you have them wear a snorkel and have them pay attention so that they can feel what it's like to swim freestyle without any disruption of the breath. Then they take the snorkel off and they try to recreate those same sensations even when they're breathing. And by alternating back and forth between wearing a snorkel and swimming without a snorkel, and so by alternating between wearing a snorkel and swimming without a snorkel, the goal is to minimize the difference between swimming with a snorkel and then swimming while breathing. And the smaller the gap, the better the breath. And so over time, the more that swimmers can make their freestyle when they're breathing feel like when they're swimming with a snorkel, the better the breathing is going to be. And so it's all about giving them a sensory goal when they're wearing the snorkel and then trying to match that sensation when they're swimming with regular breathing. Next up is a drill called Unco. And so too many swimmers pull before completing the breath. And that happens for two reasons. One, the pull is too fast, so they just let the arm drop right away. And the second issue is that the breath is too slow. So if they take too much time to get the head back, they're going to start pulling early. And so Unco is one-arm freestyle when they're breathing to the opposite side. So if they're using their left arm, they're breathing to the right. And if swimmers are slow with the breath or they rush the pull, they're not going to go anywhere because they're already going to be halfway through the pull by the time that they get their head back in line and they're in position to pull effectively. So by using this strategy, they can start to feel when they rush the pull or when they're slow with the breath, and they're going to be more aware of what they need to do in order to make things happen at the right time so that they can get an effective pull every time they breathe. And so they can do that by, one, being more patient out in front with the arm, or two, breathing faster. Now, if you ask them to do this drill fast, well, they're going to be under a lot more pressure to make both those happen, and they're more likely to improve in both skills. So this is a really effective strategy. If swimmers are rushing the pull on the non-breathing side, or if they're really slow with the breath, it can help them figure out how to be faster with the breath, more patient with the pull, and sync up the timing so when they breathe, their pull is not compromised. So if we watch here, he's going to have to breathe fast, and he's going to have to be patient with that arm. So you see there, he got the head back down before he really got into the pull. And by using just that one arm, it's going to give him a lot of feedback as to whether he's doing that effectively. And if he's breathing too slow or he's pulling too fast, he's going to lose that entire right arm. And then he's not going to go anywhere because he's not going to have that left arm to support it or bail it out. He can do something with the kick, but it's not going to feel good. It's not going to be fast, especially if you ask him to go fast. So he's got to be patient with that pull there and then fast with the breath, and that's going to get him back in line in time to pull effectively. Even if swimmers have good technical breaths, a lot of swimmers breathe too slow. And if they breathe slow, like we talked about earlier, the impact of the breath is going to be magnified. And since the breath's impact is usually negative, that is not a good thing. And so one of the reasons that the breath is slow is that swimmers are visual beings. Humans tend to move based on vision, even if it's not the most effective way, even if it's slow. And so if swimmers are taking the breath, they're waiting, they're looking, they're seeing something, they're focusing, and then putting their head back down, that's going to take a lot more time than if they don't look for anything in the first place. So the solution, have them close their eyes when they breathe. Have them open the eyes under the water because that's a whole lot safer. But when they close the eyes during the breath, they stop looking to breathe, and that allows them to breathe a whole lot faster. And so it's surprisingly effective, especially with swimmers that have slow breaths. They tend to breathe a whole lot faster. They tend to breathe lower. They tend to breathe straighter. It's one of those things that tends to work, and so it's a strategy I like to use all the time. You can have them do it while they're swimming regular freestyle, or you can have them do it when they're using any of the strategies we've talked about so far. One of the most important ideas for improving breathing is that you have to challenge it. And so one of the best ways to challenge it is lots of variation. Using all the different strategies in lots of different ways is going to be a lot more effective than using one strategy in one way. Let them feel the impact of the breath in a lot of different ways, and that's going to accelerate their learning. Also, ask them to perform all the strategies, all the drills at a variety of stroke rates, at a variety of speeds, because ultimately they have to breathe effectively when they race. And so if they never practice at higher stroke rates or higher speeds, they're probably not going to be able to execute those skills at higher stroke rates or higher speeds. And even if they swim primarily over longer distances, practicing these skills at high rates and high speeds is going to make executing those skills at slower speeds and slower rates a whole lot easier. You can also use training aids with all these strategies. It's certainly going to create a different feel, a different challenge, and in many cases, it can make it more difficult as well, further allowing for challenge, which allows for better learning. You can also execute all these different strategies with different breathing patterns. Sometimes swimmers can do it really well if they breathe every two, only to their preferred side, but they struggle when they go to the opposite side. And just doing the opposite side can be really useful for helping them improve their preferred side. It just feels a little bit different. Usually they can get some insight into what's happening on their preferred side. Having them breathe bilaterally, it's just a different rhythm. It's a different challenge. Breathing every 3 or every 5 is different than breathing exclusively to the right or exclusively to the left, regardless of the preferred side. So by challenging it in different ways with variation, performance, training aids, and breathing patterns, we're going to get more learning. We're going to get more effective learning. We're going to get more robust skills that can handle the pressure of competition. So here's a skill-based set that can help swimmers improve their breathing. So they're going to go 4 rounds through the whole thing. They're going to go a 25 stroke and roll, 25 unco, 25 paddle cap freestyle, different ways to challenge the skills, and then a 50 freestyle solid effort. They do that small piece 3 times, and after 3 times, they go 100 strong effort. They're trying to hit the same stroke count and speed each 100. And by round, they're going to go breathe every 4 to the left, every 4 to the right, every 2 to the left, every 2 to the right. So we've got 3 different drills that we're going to do. We've got different breathing patterns by round. We've got multiple opportunities to take what they're doing during the drills and try to apply it during the swimming. And they have opportunities at the end of each round to put a little bit of speed into that and try to make it happen in a little bit more challenging situation. So a lot of different ways to challenge the breath, a lot of different ways to improve the breath, all while keeping it moving. This set has a little bit more of an endurance feel. They're going to go 425s paddle cap freestyle on short rest, and they're going to go with a different breathing pattern each section. So the first piece is odd breathe 5, evens breathe 3. The next section is breathe every 4, odds left, evens right. And then the next section is breathe every 2, odds left, evens right. And the 6 100s are going to be done the same way each round. The odds are with a snorkel. The evens are breathe 25 left, 25 right. And they're going to go the same stroke count, the same speed on each 100. So regardless of whether they have the snorkel or whether they're breathing, they're trying to make it feel and trying to make it be exactly the same. And by round, they're going to add a stroke for those hundreds, and they're going to try to go faster. So by the last round, they're going to be taking 2 more strokes as compared to the first round, but they should be able to go significantly faster, but they still want to be consistent with the stroke count and still want to be consistent with the speed regardless of the breathing pattern. So a little bit more of an endurance focus here with a big emphasis on breathing skill. This last set is more of a speed set. We're going to go 3 rounds through. They're going to go 425s, paddle cap freestyle, build to fast. The odds are breathe every 4, the evens are breathe every 2. Then they're going to go 25 unco with fins, fast. So they're really getting moving here, especially with the fins. They're going to have to be really fast, really effective with that breath. First one's breathe every 4, second one's breathe every 2. Then they're going 325s freestyle, minimize stroke count and time. They're going to breathe every 5, every 4, every 3. And then they're going to go 25 freestyle fast, breathe every 2. So we've got different drills here. We got different types of speed here. We're going build, we're going fast with fins, so some overspeed. We're going minimize stroke count and time, and we're going straight up fast. And we've got different breathing patterns throughout as well to challenge swimmers in different ways so that they can learn how to execute these skills really well at high speeds, which is the ultimate challenge, is executing a breath while swimming at maximal speed and not having it negatively impact the stroke. Rotation timing is absolutely critical for fast freestyle. Unfortunately, it's a skill that many swimmers struggle with. Not only is rotation timing difficult to manage in general, it also changes with speed, which adds another layer of complexity that we have to address if we want to help swimmers improve it. We're going to describe why rotation timing is so important. We're going to go over what effective rotation timing is and what it looks like. We're going to talk about why it's difficult to improve rotation timing. And finally, we're going to talk solutions in terms of how to help swimmers actually improve their rotation timing. Let's dive in. Why does rotation timing matter? Well, as with almost all skills, it all comes down to better alignment and more propulsion. It allows swimmers to be in the right position at the right time to minimize resistance and maximize propulsion. So first of all, it allows for effective arm recoveries. If swimmers are flat to the water and they try to get the arm out of the water, it's almost impossible to do so. And if they do, it's going to be a really low, straight arm recovery, which is not going to be effective at maintaining alignment. And so by rotating, it allows swimmers to get their arms out of the water for the recovery and to do so effortlessly. And so we don't have low swinging arm recoveries that are going to pull the body from side to side. And if the body's being pulled from side to side, that means alignment's been lost, and that's going to lead to more resistance. And so more than anything else, rotation allows for the arms to be recovered smoothly. And if the arms can be recovered smoothly, swimmers are going to maintain a lot better alignment with a lot less resistance. And just as importantly, if those arms are swinging low and wide, it's going to be a lot harder to set up the stroke because those arms are going to be crashing in at all sorts of angles, and that's going to be very difficult to directly set up the stroke. And so swimmers' pulse are going to be compromised the instant the hands enter the water. And once they do enter the water, rotation is also important for executing a great pull. It makes it easier for the swimmers to get the arm in a position where they can get the whole hand, the whole forearm facing backwards, and they can do so earlier in the stroke. And it allows them to maintain those positions for longer periods of time as swimmers rotate through the pull. Finally, it allows for better acceleration through the pull because as the arm's pulling through and the body's rotating away, it adds a little bit more hand speed, a little bit more arm speed, and that can create a little bit more propulsion as well. And so rotation makes a huge difference in the arm recoveries, and it makes a relevant difference in the arm pulls. And so in both cases, we got better alignment, more propulsion, and that means more speed. So what is great rotation timing? Well, during the pull, when the shoulder is rotating up, the rotation should occur with the pull. And so in terms of the timing of it, approximately when the body gets flat, and we'll take a look at this video in a second, that's when the arm should pass under the shoulder. So if the left arm is in front, the left shoulder is rotated down, the left arm starts to pull, the left shoulder starts to come up, and then as the hand passes the shoulder, the body's flat, and then the hand keeps moving, and the left shoulder rotates up. And so that's going to be the timing of the rotation relative to the pull, regardless of how fast swimmers are going. And by the end of the pull, there's going to be the most amount of rotation there is in the stroke, and that makes it much easier to start the arm recovery. Now, what's the timing of the rotation in the other direction relative to the arm recovery? Well, during the sprint stroke, when swimmers are trying to go as fast as they can, the arm recovery and the rotation are going to happen together. And when the hand enters the water, the swimmer will already be rotated down. In distance swimming, however, there's going to be a recovery of the arm, and then the rotation happens primarily after the arm recovery. And so that's where the timing is a little bit different. And just as importantly, everything's happening at the same time. When one side's rotating up, one side's rotating down. And so swimmers have to manage the rotational timing when different arms are doing different things at different times, and that's where things can get a little bit tricky. Now, to clarify, to make sure you understand exactly what I'm talking about, we'll take a look at some videos where you can see it in action. So if we watch this swimmer here, he's extended out on the left arm, and he's rotated with the left side down. And as he starts to pull, right there, he's going to be about flat in the water. And as you can see, his arm is traveling under his shoulder, and then he's going to continue to rotate through. And so again, he's going to be out on his left side. He's going to start to pull. He rotates back, and he's pretty much flat as that arm passes under the shoulder, and then he continues to rotate through. And so that's the timing of the pull. Now, if we watch the arms here, what's going to happen, he's going to recover. He's still kind of on his side, and then he rotates through after the arm recovery. And so again, we're watching the other arm, enters there, and then you see the rotation happening afterward. So the rotation is a little bit later relative to the arm recovery during longer swimming at slower speeds, but the timing of the pull is going to be the same regardless of the speed. The hand, the arm is going to be passing under the shoulder, and that's when the body is going to be flat and then continues rotating through. So with a sprinter, there's not going to be quite as much rotation, but he's on his left side here. He's going to pull. When the arm passes under the shoulder, he's pretty much flat, and you can see that he rotates through after that. So the timing of the pull is pretty much the same. So he's on his right side here. You can see he's pretty much flat here as the arm passes under, and then he rotates through to the other side. Now, the thing to pay attention to here, the difference is the arm recoveries. And so as the arm enters here on the right, he's already rotated to his side. So you can see, boom, he's rotated as he enters rather than entering and then rotating. And then on the left side, it's going to be the same thing.
as the hand enters, he's rotated as he enters. And so that's the key difference in the timing of the arms and the rotation with sprint freestyle and distance freestyle is the arm pull timing is the same. Body's more or less flat as the arm passes under the body. But in distance freestyle, there's more of an entry and then a rotation. Whereas here, as he enters, he's already rotated to that side. And so that's a key difference in the timing of the two strokes. And that's going to be something that swimmers have to manage as they transition from slower speeds to faster speeds or from faster speeds to slower speeds. So what's the challenge here? What makes rotation timing difficult? Well, timing is all about precision and feel. And so it's very hard to tell someone exactly what to do because it's not so much about positions, it's about executing the right positions relative to other positions. And so that's where it's difficult. It's all about timing, not about position. And so that can be difficult to express into words. And so it's also subtle. Small differences in timing can have a big impact on skill and speed. And sometimes those slight subtle differences are difficult to describe and they're difficult for swimmers to understand and they're difficult for swimmers to act upon. Timing also changes. As we just discussed, there's a difference between more of a distance freestyle timing and more of a sprint freestyle timing. And so swimmers have to shift the timing of the recovery and the rotation in order to go faster. But what makes it more difficult is that the timing of the pull and the rotation does not change. So they have to change the recovery timing, but not the pull timing. And that's where things can get tricky. And that's where a lot of swimmers make mistakes is that they change the timing in the wrong place. And as a result, they go slower. So timing is really subtle. It requires great precision. It's difficult to describe, and the timing changes, but only in the rotational timing of the recovery and not the rotational timing of the pull. And so that can cause all sorts of problems when it comes to helping swimmers learn these skills. So now it's time to talk solutions. We have to help swimmers feel the key skills and feel the key timing, because if they can't feel it, they're going to have a really hard time executing on it. And just as importantly, we have to help them learn to shift their timing and select their timing so that they can execute the right skill in the right situation. We have to make these skills relatively robust so that they can make these adjustments in races. They can become aware of when they've lost their timing, and they can be skilled enough to get that timing back. So the first tool I like is called SAVE, or straight arm, breathe every stroke. And so the purpose here is to exaggerate the rotation, as some swimmers are simply not rotating enough. And if we exaggerate it, we overdo it, we can help them feel the side-to-side action of the body, and they can feel how the rhythm of the stroke is driven by that side-to-side movement. If swimmers get ahead of their rotation, the arms aren't going to be in the right position, and then swimmers are going to struggle to either pull effectively or recover the arms effectively. So by exaggerating the rotation, by slowing it down, we can help swimmers feel how the side-to-side movement drives the rhythm of the stroke, and we can build upon that awareness to develop more specific skills. It also helps swimmers understand the importance of the rotation to a smooth, fluid recovery. By exaggerating how much they rotate, they realize how easy it is to get the arms out of the water. So we take a look at this swimmer here. You can see the side-to-side motion. You can see it's exaggerated by the breath. It's exaggerated by the straight arm, and he's getting lots of range of motion from side to side. And so more than anything else, that's what we're really looking for. We're looking for the big side-to-side motion. The breath exaggerates it. The straight arm exaggerates it. That's going to help them get more rotation through the stroke. And the more rotation they can get through the stroke, they can become aware of that central rhythm. And then we can start to manipulate that closer to what they need to do in races. Next up is underwater recovery. And so swimmers are just going to swim freestyle, but they're going to recover the arms under the water. And so what's really valuable about this tool is that it helps emphasize the switching nature of the rotation. And because the arm recoveries are underwater, it's a much simpler version of freestyle. So as one arm goes forward, the other arm comes back. And as one side rotates down, the other side rotates up. And so now we're helping swimmers learn how to pair the arms with the recovery. The movement of the body, the movement of the arms tend to get synced up really easily, and it tends to happen really intuitively. It tends to happen naturally, and most swimmers tend to do it correctly with very little instruction. It's very difficult to not rotate, and it's difficult to not time the arms and the rotation effectively. Just as importantly, it emphasizes the rhythm of the stroke being driven by the rotations of the body. Swimmers learn to rotate up with the pull, and they learn to rotate down with the recovery. And so again, we're syncing up the arms with the rotation, and we're letting the rotation drive the rhythm of the stroke. Swimmers are only going to be able to go as fast as they can rotate effectively. If their arms are getting ahead of their rotation, it's going to compromise their recovery.
or their pull or both. So we can help them feel how the rotation drives the rhythm and they can build their stroke around that. Most importantly, it's effective because it's simple, it's easy for swimmers to understand, and the actions tend to happen naturally so they don't require a lot of coaching. So here it is in action, basically exactly what you'd think it would be. And so you can see when the arm goes forward, the body rotates down. When the arm comes back, the body rotates up. And so the timing of it tends to happen really naturally. You can see the switching from side to side action, and he can hang out in front as long as he wants, or he can keep it relatively brief. It depends on what you want to accomplish. And that's another tool that's really valuable, is you can use it for both longer distance timing and more sprint timing. You just change how fast the hands are moving, how long they're hanging out in the front of the stroke. So again, really useful for helping swimmers understand how to use the arms and the body together to drive the rhythm of the stroke and to execute really good timing. Now, some swimmers are able to take what they learn and feel in underwater recovery and go right into freestyle and make it look great. However, some swimmers struggle with that. So to help them transition from underwater recovery to regular freestyle, you can go over-under freestyle. So one arm's recovering over the water, one arm is recovering under the water. So the value of this tool is that it tends to maintain the timing that we see in underwater recovery, but swimmers can start to experiment with recovering one arm over the water. When you do this, you want to make sure you alternate between left and right arm going over the water so swimmers can do it well on both sides, and you may find that they're better at one side than the other. That's fine. You just want to make sure that that gets ironed out over time. So more than anything else, this is a strategy that's useful for helping swimmers take what they learned during underwater recovery and get it to show up in freestyle. And so it's going to be most effective when used in combination with underwater recovery and regular freestyle. And so just have swimmers bounce back and forth between all three, and that's going to help get the transfer that you're looking for. And eventually, those skills are going to show up in regular freestyle, and that is what we're really after. So again, just like underwater recovery, except we've got one arm over the water, one arm under the water, and that's going to help him maintain that same timing while having one arm recovering over the water. And so if you see here, you can see there's really good side-to-side rotation. The arm goes forward, the body goes forward, the arm comes back, the body comes back, and that is the skill we're looking to achieve. And so the better swimmers can be while executing this drill, the more likely it is that they're going to be able to execute it when swimming regular freestyle. Next up is what I call alligator. And so swimmers are going to have the head up, but the eyes are going to be level with the water. So it's not full-on water polo drill. The head is actually going to be lower. And so just like an alligator sits with its eyes right on the surface, that's what swimmers are going to be trying to do. And the value here is that because the head's up a little bit higher, swimmers have to exaggerate the rotation of the shoulders, and it forces them to rotate with the arm recovery, not after the arm recovery. They can't really ride out the front of the stroke here. They've got to be good with driving the shoulders, and the rotation has to happen during the arm recovery. And as we saw in the video earlier, that's what sprint timing is all about. So rather than telling swimmers what to do or how to do it in terms of how to execute their timing, it's a lot more effective to put them in position where they pretty much have to do it correctly. And what you want to focus on is making sure that they're keeping the arms moving, they're not riding out in front of the stroke, and you want to focus on symmetry. So there shouldn't be a gallop here, there shouldn't be a lope here. They should be really consistent with going side to side. And so this is one, again, you could pair with underwater recovery, have them do a 25 or whatever of that, and then do a 25 of alligator with a little bit more tempo. Again, heads up a little bit, and they're really focusing on rotating the shoulders with the arm recovery. That's going to help them get the timing that they're looking for. So regardless if you're using specific drills or if you're having them swim regular freestyle, resistance can be really effective for developing timing because it slows swimmers down. It gives them more time within the stroke cycle to figure out what's happening. So if swimmers are trying to figure out sprint freestyle timing and they're doing it at 1 second per cycle, that's happening really, really fast. The odds that they're going to be able to make change is not very high. And so by giving them resistance and challenging them to execute the timing, it slows it down a little bit, but it still lets them feel pressure on the water with their hands because of the resistance, and that gives them the opportunity to figure out what's happening and how to make adjustments. So if you didn't have the resistance and you had them swim at slower stroke rates with sprint timing, it doesn't really work, and that's a reason why swimmers use distance timing at slower speeds. But because of the resistance, they can still hold water at slow stroke rates and swim with sprint timing at low stroke rates. And again, the more time we give them to feel things out, to figure things out within a stroke cycle, the more likely it is that they're going to make positive changes. And as with everything, I like to alternate between resisted and unresisted swimming because that lets them feel the skills and then it gives them the chance to execute those skills in normal conditions. And again, it doesn't matter how well they can do it with resistance. What ultimately matters is how well they can do it without resistance. So we want to give them the opportunity to feel it with the resistance, but then execute it without the resistance. Now, as we discussed earlier, speed changes timing. And so swimmers have to be able to not only adjust their timing, they have to be able to adjust their timing in a way that creates speed. And so to challenge that, you can use a variety of performance goals. You can have them go at different speeds, at different stroke rates, different stroke counts, different combinations of the three. You can go high, you can go low, you can go everything in between, you can alternate. So for instance, you're having them go underwater recovery, but you're alternating at a fast stroke rate and a low stroke rate. That's going to challenge them to change their timing. And then you throw in some regular freestyle done the same way, and they're going to have to execute good timing at high rates and low rates and switch back and forth. The better they can switch back and forth, the more locked in those skills are and the more resilient they are. That means more likely than not, and that is what it's ultimately about. What's really valuable about changing the performance goals is that it requires swimmers to change. They have to use different timing at 1.0 seconds per cycle versus 2.0 seconds per cycle. They're going to organize the stroke differently at different stroke rates, at different stroke counts, and at different speeds. And by asking them to do so on command and to hit it right away, that means they have more control. If we ask swimmers to alternate between 10 strokes a lap and 14 strokes per lap, they're going to have to be able to switch how they swim in order to make that happen. And if you have speed expectations on that too, they're going to have to be effective at changing their timing too. And whether it's drills or freestyle, I use the same principles, I use the same concepts because that helps them learn how to hit effective timing no matter what the situation. So in this set, we're going to focus on the skills here, and we're going to challenge swimmers to execute different timing in different contexts. So they're going to go 425 save. They got to take one less stroke per 25, so we're really going to stretch that out, stretch the timing out. 100 freestyle, second 50 fewer strokes. Then they're going to go 425s underwater recovery. Again, try to really stretch out the timing. Then 100 freestyle, same but faster. So they got second 50 fewer strokes again, but they got to go faster. Then 625s over under freestyle, take one less stroke per 25 in pairs, so you'd alternate left and right there. Then again, another 100 freestyle, second 50 fewer strokes. The second half is done the same way, but now we're adding speed, so we're going to compress the timing. So the first half of the set, we stretched it out. Now we're going to compress it. So the drills are all done the same way, but now they're going to descend to strong. And the hundreds, the stroke count stays the same, but each 100, they're going to add one stroke per 25. So if they took 12 strokes each 25 on the 100, now they're going to take 13. So by alternating between the drills and the swim, we challenge them with the drills and then let it happen in the swims. And by challenging them with the different stroke counts and then speed in the second half, we challenge them to change their timing and do so effectively. This set is more of an endurance set, so they're going to go 400, 300, 200, 100. They're going to do that twice. The first time through is underwater recovery as the drill. The second time through is over-under freestyle as the drill. The drill, they're always going to build to fast, so we're locking in that timing, and then we're adding a speed component to it. And then on the 75, it's always full stroke freestyle, and they're trying to execute with that same great timing. The 400, the 75s are steady, and then solid, and then strong, and then stronger, and we'll repeat that for the second half of the set as well. So we're giving them the chance to feel out the timing with the drills. We're challenging them with a little bit of speed, and then we're asking for more and more speed as they go through and challenging them to maintain their timing at higher speeds and with higher effort levels. So a great way to continually reinforce the skills and help swimmers continue to improve those skills while still developing their fitness. Last set is more of a speed set. They're going to go 4 rounds through. They're going to go 25 underwater recovery, 2 25s over under freestyle, 1 with each arm, 25 alligator, 25 freestyle, and then a 25 freestyle. The first 5 25s are all minimized stroke count and time, so they got to be long and fast, and the last 25 is all fast. The first round is with a parachute. The second round is with no equipment. The third is with a parachute. The fourth is with no equipment. So we're challenging them with the resistance. We're challenging them with the different drills, and we're challenging them to be long and fast at the same time. So we're putting timing under pressure in a lot of different ways, and a lot of different ways that are asking for speed, and that's going to help them learn how to execute great timing at faster speeds without giving up stroke length. And that's what a lot of swimmers struggle with when they try to sprint. They just end up spinning, and a set like this can be really useful for helping them learn how to get long and how to stay strong at speed and do so by executing great timing.
More than any other stroke, freestyle changes from slow speeds to fast speeds, and that all shows up in arm-to-arm timing. If swimmers aren't skilled at managing their timing and being able to quickly and easily shift gears from lower speeds to higher speeds, they're going to be inefficient and ineffective at swimming at a range of speeds. It's a critical skill in freestyle, and swimmers that are more effective at managing their arm-to-arm timing are going to be a lot more effective at swimming at a range of speeds over a range of distances. And while swimmers may prefer to specialize in one or two event distances, their training is likely going to take place across a wide spectrum of intensities, and the better swimmers are able to manage arm-to-arm timing, the more effectively they're going to be able to train, and the more effectively they're able to train, the more effectively they're going to be able to race. Let's dive deep into why arm-to-arm timing matters, what it actually is, what it looks like, why it's difficult to improve, and how to make it happen. Let's check it out. So why does timing matter? Well, it all comes down to speed. So swimmers can increase their speed by 1, creating more propulsion per pull, or 2, reducing the time between pulls, or they can do both at the same time. And so the less time there is between pulls, the more propulsion is created without a change in the pull itself. And so if the swimmer pulls here, and then here, and then here, and then here, there's a lot of space between those pulls, and that's going to slow speed. But if swimmers pull like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, there's no space in between those pulls. There's no time in between those pulls, and that allows swimmers to achieve a much higher speed, even if they don't actually pull any harder. There's a catch there. If there's no space in between the pulls, that means there's a lot less recovery in between each pull, and each arm is going to be working in a much more continuous manner. The harder swimmers work, the more continuously they work. That means the more energy that's required, and therefore the less endurance they tend to have. And so it's a really powerful gear shift that can be used to create speed as opposed to, and in addition to, just trying to pull harder. And so swimmers can swim faster by pulling harder without changing their timing. But if they change their timing, they don't necessarily have to pull harder. And if they choose to pull harder, they can swim even faster. So it's a really powerful tool. And the better swimmers can learn to manage their timing, the more effective they're going to be, the faster they'll swim, and the more efficient they'll be. So what is arm-to-arm timing? Well, at slow speeds, the arms catch up in the front of the stroke, and that both arms end up being in front of the shoulders at the same time at some point in the stroke cycle. And generally, swimmers are going to enter the water, they're going to pause, they're going to wait to set up the stroke, and then they're going to set up the stroke. And so because of that, there's going to be time, there's going to be separation between propulsive actions. So the one arm pulls, and then there's a pause, and then the other arm pulls, there's a pause, and then the other arm pulls, and so on. So there's space, there's time in between those arm pulls. At higher speeds, however, the arms are going to move in opposition. As soon as one arm stops pulling, the other arm is going to start pulling, and then just vice versa. So at any point in the stroke, one of the arms is going to be creating at least a little bit of propulsion, and that allows for much more continuous propulsion and continuous speed. And again, there's no pause after the entry. In order to do that, swimmers have to get into the next stroke cycle right away, and that eliminates the time between propulsive actions. So again, more continuous propulsion, more speed. So those represent the extremes: really smooth, slow swimming, and then really fast sprint swimming. And in between, we have intermediate timing, where there's less of a pause in the front, but it's still not continuous, and that's going to be a spectrum in terms of how fast swimmers are swimming. That's going to determine, to some extent, the timing that they use. So to represent the extremes, we're going to take a look at a 1,500-meter swimmer and a 50-meter swimmer, both swimming in a major international competition and winning a major international competition. So we watch here, the left arm just finished pulling, and then the right arm doesn't really start pulling until the left arm enters the water. And so again, that left arm's just hanging out there, and right about now, he's starting to pull, and the right arm is entering. And so from here to there, there's no propulsion being created with the upper body. And so that's going to create a bunch of space, a bunch of time in between arm pulls, and that's going to allow swimmers to recover a little bit. However, it's going to make it more difficult to create speed, because for that period of time, there's no propulsion coming from the upper body, which is going to make it harder to move forward. So again, no propulsion, and then finally propulsion, and then no propulsion, and finally propulsion. So there's the space between those strokes, which is what characterizes a catch-up or overlap timing, which is going to happen at slower speeds relative to maximal speeds. Now, at the other extreme, we have sprint timing. So if we watch here, his left arm has entered the water. He's starting to pull. If we watch that right arm in the back, he's still in the water, and he's already starting to pull right when that opposite arm exits the water. Now, if we watch here, the right arm is entering the water. The left arm is still pulling, and then the right arm's already pulling as the left arm exits the water. So the arms are on opposite points of the stroke cycle. So right here, he's at the entry, and he's at the exit, and then he's going to switch, and he's at the entry, and he's at the exit. And so the arms are moving in opposition, and because of that, there's no time where he's not creating propulsion on the water. So right here, he's already creating propulsion on the left arm, and he just exited with the right arm. So there's no space, and there's no pause in between the strokes. And so even if those two swimmers are pulling with the same effort level, there's going to be more speed in the sprinter's case because there's no pause in propulsion. And of course, sprinters are probably going to be pulling harder too, which is going to create even more speed. The important thing to consider, though, is that he can go faster. We can change speeds by changing the timing, by changing the gear, and that allows for more speed because there's more continuous propulsion simply by timing the arms differently. So what's the challenge in improving timing? The first thing is it's difficult to describe. And so while I showed you what's happening, that doesn't necessarily relate to what swimmers are going to feel and help them understand how to make it happen, because there's no specific action for them to perform. You can't tell them to bend the elbow at 90 degrees or whatever. You can't tell them to move the arm to the left or to the right. It's the relationship between the arms that matters and that changes. And that's not a specific position that swimmers have to get into or a specific thing that they have to do. It's the relationship that's important, and it's the relationship that changes when timing changes. To make things even more complicated, there's no perfect timing. Good timing is going to depend on the person and the situation, how fast they're going, how much fatigue they're experiencing, and so on. It's going to change a lot depending on who the swimmer is and what they're trying to do. Just looking back to those last two videos, both of those swimmers displayed excellent timing. They both won an Olympic gold medal, but the timing was clearly very different. So swimmers have to learn the right timing for them in the right situation, and it's difficult as a coach to know exactly what that solution is going to be for them, let alone how to communicate what they need to do. Finally, most swimmers have a timing that they're most comfortable with. They struggle to lengthen it out, and they struggle to shrink it down. And while they may be able to make those changes, they don't do so with much efficiency. And that's one reason why you see distance swimmers that really struggle to sprint. They can move their arms faster, but they really struggle with the effective timing of it. And same thing with sprinters, they really struggle to lengthen things out and do so with efficiency. So you have swimmers that have a natural tendency, and it can be difficult to break them out of that. And that makes it very difficult for them to have flexible timing and effective timing across a bunch of different speeds. So how do we help swimmers develop more effective arm-to-arm timing in freestyle? Well, we're going to have to overcome the challenges that we just discussed. So we're going to have to help swimmers figure out how to develop flexible timing, and we're going to have to help them learn how to adapt their timing for the certain situations. More importantly, we're going to have to help them feel what's better timing and worse timing, and we're going to have to help them feel the difference between effective timing at a certain speed and effective timing at a different speed. Because swimmers are going to have to figure out the best timing for them, and they're going to have to learn how to be able to adjust that timing depending on the training task, depending on the race that they're trying to be successful in. So more than anything else, we're going to have to give them options. We're going to have to help them learn how to feel great timing, and then we're going to have to learn how to help them execute that great timing in more and more difficult situations. In most cases, the starting point for me is going to be underwater recovery freestyle. By recovering the arms underwater, it encourages swimmers to sync things up, to tie in the rotation timing and the arm timing, and to get things happening and get everything working together. Swimmers learn how to recover at the right time, they learn how to pull at the right time, and they can tie that all in with the rotation. So it's a really great baseline for effective timing before we start to manipulate that depending on how fast swimmers want to go. Once they get the hang of underwater recovery, you can start having them recover one arm over the water, one arm under the water, and so they start to get a feel for the overwater recovery and how that changes things a little bit. However, keeping one arm under the water allows them to maintain really good timing and synchrony between the shoulders, the rotation, and the arms. Then, once they get the hang of over-under freestyle, you can progress to regular freestyle. If swimmers struggle with this basic activity, there's not much point in trying to get them to learn how to adapt their timing for either sprint or endurance swimming. They've got to have this baseline, they've got to have this stability, and then from that point, we can start manipulating things, trying to help them learn how to go fast, how to swim long, using the strategies that follow. So underwater recovery is exactly what it sounds like. Swimmers going to recover the arms under the water, and they're going to switch them back and forth. And so the key idea here is that when they reach forward, they roll forward, and when they pull back, they roll back. And so if swimmers can understand that connection between the shoulders, the rotation, and the arms, they're going to have a good baseline for rotating effectively and for timing the strokes effectively. If the arms are moving independent of the body, it's going to be really difficult to get things locked in. So this can be a really effective starting point to help swimmers figure out how to time their freestyle well. And once they figure that out, they can start to transition to over-under recovery, where they recover one arm over the water, one arm under the water, and that can be really useful for helping transition to regular freestyle. The next strategy is to drill at the extremes of timing. And so if swimmers can execute the extremes of timing, they're usually able to fill in the details in the middle. And so they can swim with really long timing and really fast timing. Intermediate timing is usually not too much of a problem. And so we want to use drills that exaggerate extreme timing. So the first one is going to be alligator, where they swim with the head up, but the eyes are right at the surface of the water. And so to do that, swimmers aren't going to be able to pause in the front of the stroke, and they're going to have to be really good with rotating and driving the shoulders to help them get the arms out of the water and swing the arms forward. So when we watched our sprint freestyler earlier, you could see that he was very continuous with his arm motions and that there was really good shoulder drive. That's what the alligator exercise can do and can allow them to maintain really good fluidity by having the eyes at surface level as opposed to kicking the head up high. It allows for a lot more rhythm, and it's a lot more similar to regular freestyle. However, by just having the head up a little bit, you get that better shoulder drive and you get a more immediate action when the arm enters the water. At the other extreme, you can use save, which is straight arm, breathe every stroke. And what they're going to do there is they're going to really exaggerate the rotation from side to side. That's going to be exaggerated with the breathing. By recovering the arm straight over the water, they're going to have to, again, really rotate a lot higher, a lot more. And so we're exaggerating the space in between the strokes. They're going to have to be patient in the front. They're going to have to wait for it with each stroke. And again, that helps them learn to create more space to really expand the stroke and take more time in between strokes. Once they get the hang of the drills, you start challenging them with speed, with stroke rate, with stroke count, and a lot of different ways to help them learn how to execute those drills in more difficult situations and with bigger challenges. So this is alligator, and he can actually have his head a little bit lower if he wanted to. The idea is that you're staying really low, just picking up the head a little bit so that the eyes are right at the level of the water, and that gives them a little bit more freedom to recover the arms and then get right on top of it without any pause in the front of the stroke. In contrast here with save, there's going to be a lot more patience in the front of the stroke. You can see the exaggerated rotation and getting a lot more range of motion, and that's ultimately what we're going to be looking for to exaggerate here. We want more space in the stroke. We definitely want overlap or catch-up timing in the front, and we want them to take a lot of time in between strokes and big pauses in between the pulls and a lot of space between the pulls. Next strategy for improving these skills is alternating speeds. And so we talked about speed is the biggest driver of timing when swimmers move from a distance swim to a sprint swim. That's going to really facilitate differences in timing, so we can challenge them to control their timing by changing their speed. So we want to see, can they make adjustments? Can they shift gears? Can they shift gears effectively? Can they shift gears efficiently? Can they make big gear shifts? Can they make small gear shifts? So one, can they actually change their timing? That's going to be pretty important. If they can't do that, that's where we start. Two, can they shift gears effectively? Can they actually change speeds and do so by changing their timing? Can they change gears efficiently? So are they able to do it in a way that doesn't take a ton of energy? Can they create more speed just by changing the timing without having to try harder? And when they shift down, can they really reduce the energy demand of what they're trying to do? And so sometimes it's really difficult for swimmers to make big jumps in timing back to back. And then other times it's difficult for swimmers to make subtle changes. They can make big ones, but they can't make subtle ones. And likewise, other swimmers can make those small changes, but only within a narrow range. They can't make really big changes. And so by having swimmers use a lot of different speeds and alternate those speeds going faster or slower, descending or building, it's going to be a lot more effective at helping them learn how to manipulate and control their timing in order to create speed, in order to create speed efficiently. Next strategy is to have them create speed at various stroke counts. So by having swimmers swim at different stroke counts, they have to use a different timing to do so effectively. And by having swimmers create speed at various stroke counts, they have to learn to use that timing effectively. If they're taking 8 strokes per lap, they have to be able to create speed and use that timing well. If they're taking 12 strokes a lap, they need to be able to use that timing well and create speed. So regardless of what the stroke count is, if you ask them to go fast at that count, they'll learn how to create speed well. And if you change the counts, you're going to require them to use different stroke timing in order to create speed. As with changing speed, if you vary the nature of the stroke counts, it can be really helpful for promoting change. So you can perform multiple repetitions at a given count. So you can go 3 reps at 10 strokes, 3 reps at 14 strokes, And then you can also alternate between higher and lower counts, alternate between 8 and 12, 8 and 12, 8 and 12, or whatever the stroke counts are going to be. You can increase the stroke count each rep. So we go 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, or we go 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10. And again, you can have them go at various speeds within those changes. So by having them use a lot of different stroke counts and asking them to perform at a lot of different stroke counts, we're going to help them become more flexible with their timing and, more importantly, be able to perform at different stroke timings. Just like with stroke counts, you can perform the same strategy with stroke rates. So if you have a tempo trainer, it can be really effective. You just set the rate, have them follow the beeps. So if you give them a really slow stroke rate, they're going to have to be really long and create a lot of space between strokes. If you give them a really fast stroke rate, the timing is going to be very different. And just as with stroke counts, you can challenge them to go fast at those different rates. If it's a really slow stroke rate and they got to create speed, that's going to take a different strategy than a really fast stroke rate and trying to create speed as well. So not only are they able to switch their timing, they're able to create speed at different stroke timings. And just as with stroke counts, you can vary the nature of the stroke rates. You can have them go multiple repetitions at a given rate. You can have them alternate between high rates and low rates. So for instance, you can have them alternate between a 100 stroke rate and a 1500 stroke rate and have them go back and forth. You can increase the stroke rate each rep, so faster and faster each rep, or you can have them decrease the rate each rep and go slower and slower each rep. There's lots of different ways to challenge them, and in every case, by changing the stroke rate, you're going to change their timing, and by asking them to swim fast at a given stroke rate, you're going to challenge their ability to use that stroke timing effectively. So when we consider the different drills, we've considered the different ways to manipulate speed, stroke count, and stroke rate, and different variations within that. We've got a lot of different options. And so to help swimmers improve their timing, you want to use a lot of those options. So if they can execute great timing, they can switch it up in different contexts, and they can perform in different contexts, they're going to have control over what they can do. And if they have control over what they can do, they're going to be able to manage that in races a whole lot more effectively. And whether that's a race where they have to change timing, which is going to be any middle distance or distance event, or if it's a sprint where they have to learn how to maintain their timing, having that mastery, having that ability to manage timing in a lot of different situations and produce performance in those situations is going to be extremely valuable. And you don't just have to stick with those drills or those stroke rate, speed, or stroke count modifications. You can also add training aids into the mix, doing it with fins, with a buoy, etc. You can add resistance, so drag socks, stretch cords, parachutes, whatever. Adding that into the mix, that's going to create another challenge. Different hand postures, so closed fist, holding a paddle upside down. All these different options can add variety, and the more variety there is, the more they can execute in different contexts, the more prepared they're going to be to execute in any context, and in particular, the contexts that matter in races. So this is a skill-based set. We're going to go 2 rounds through this. They're going to go 225s underwater recovery. Then they're going to go 625s. The odds are save. The evens are alligator. On the save, they're going to descend 1 to 3, so get faster. And on the alligator, they're actually going to get slower 1 to 3. Then they're going to go 450s freestyle. The odds are 25 as few strokes as possible, 25 build to fast. And the evens are 25 build to fast, 25 as few strokes as possible. So we're setting things up with the underwater recovery, then with the save and the alligator. On the save, they're trying to go faster, and the timing is going to get closer and closer together. And on the alligator, they're trying to go slower, so the timing is going to get further and further apart. That's going to challenge them to do the opposite of what the drill is intended to do. Then on the 450s, they're alternating between being really long and being really fast, and they're challenged to do that in alternating ways. The next half of the set is basically the same idea, except on those saves, now they're going to get slower each one, and they're going to descend, they're going to get faster on the alligator ones. Then freestyle, they're going to try to go as big a descent as possible without increasing the effort, so they have to change the timing in order to go faster. So a lot of different ways to challenge the skills here, challenge the drills here, and hopefully help swimmers learn to experience and improve the extremes of timing and being able to manipulate that in order to create speed. This is more of an aerobic set with a little bit more of a sprint spice throughout. So they're going to go 2 12.5s alligator fast, and then a 50 at 200 speed. Then they're going to go 300 cruise, and the first 25 of every 100 is save. So we're getting a little bit of a spike here, and then we're doing that with really fast timing, and then we'll back that up with some really long, smooth timing. Then they're going to go the same basic thing, except now it's a 25 freestyle at 100 speed, and then they're going to go 2 150s for a little bit faster, and again, the first 25 of every 150 is saved. Next piece through, again, those alligator reps, and then a 15 at 50 speed, and then 3 100 solid effort, first 25 of every 100 is saved. So a little bit of a speed spike with speed timing, and then really space that out and be really long, be really smooth on those 300-meter segments. 2 rounds through that to help them experience the extremes again of the timing so that they can learn how to manage the opposite ends and then hopefully fill everything in when it's time to go a little bit faster and swim at an intermediate speed. This is more of a speed set. They're going to go 425s free as fast as possible. The odds are going to be at 1.8 seconds per cycle, so it's going to take them 1.8 seconds each cycle, and then the evens are at 1.3. So there's a pretty big difference between those two, and they're still trying to go as fast as they can. Then they're going to go 50 easy, and then they're going to go 425s as fast as possible again. Now the odds are at 10 strokes per lap, and the evens are at 3. Now as we move down the set, the same basic idea holds. We're going to go as fast as possible. We're going to alternate between faster and lower rates, more or less strokes, but the difference is the spread increases. So the odd reps are going to get longer in that the stroke rate is going to be slower and the stroke count is going to be lower, and then the even reps are going to get tighter in that the stroke rate is going to get faster and the stroke count is going to go higher, which is going to allow them to go faster. So it's really going to be a challenge for them. One, they're going to have to manage stroke rates and stroke counts. They're trying to go as fast as they can, and they're working at the extremes of fast tempo, slow tempo, long strokes, shorter strokes, and those numbers are changing as they go. And of course, pick the appropriate stroke counts and the stroke rates for your swimmers. These are just an example, but it's a real challenge to help swimmers learn how to change their timing, and they have to go fast within that timing. There's a saying that it's not what happens over the water that matters, but what happens under the water that matters most when it comes to creating speed in freestyle or really any stroke. And while there's some truth to that, once what happens over the water influences what happens under the water, now we have a problem. We're going to cover how to improve the arm recoveries in freestyle. We're going to discuss why it matters. We're going to talk about what swimmers need to do in order to have effective arm recoveries. We're going to talk about why it can be difficult to improve arm recoveries. And then we're going to go through solutions that you can use to help your swimmers improve their arm recoveries. If swimmers have ineffective arm recoveries, it can really hinder the rest of their stroke. So it's an issue that does need to be addressed. So why does it matter? First of all, poor arm recoveries can negatively impact alignment. The arm recoveries aren't direct, they're going to disrupt alignment. So if they're coming in from the side, guess what? The body's going to start moving side to side. If they're coming straight down, it's going to force swimmers to move up and down. And so disrupted alignment, that's going to mean less speed. It also impacts propulsion. So again, if the arm recoveries aren't direct, they're coming across the body, they're going way out to the side, the arms won't be in an effective position to create a lot of propulsion. So if the recoveries are negatively impacting the ability to set up the stroke and get a great pull, that's going to influence speed as well. So the less propulsion swimmers can create as a result of poor arm recoveries, the less speed they're going to have. Lastly, if the arm recoveries aren't direct, it's going to take more time. The more time it takes, the slower the stroke rate, and especially if it's a slow stroke rate unnecessarily, that means less speed. So if swimmers are having arm recoveries that are disrupting their alignment, causing them to create less propulsion and taking more time than they need to, for all those reasons, poor arm recoveries can slow swimmers down, and until they improve those recoveries, they're not going to be able to swim as fast as they otherwise could. So what are effective arm recoveries? In many cases, we tend to focus on the superficial aspects of the arm recovery and deem it good or bad. From my perspective, what the arm recovery actually looks like is secondary to the impact of the arm recovery. More than anything else, we want to have direct arm recoveries where the arms are moving forward through the recovery. And more importantly, once they get to the point where they enter the water, we want the hands moving forward as they enter the water. If the hands are moving side to side, whether that's across the body or out to the side, or they're moving straight down, that's going to have a negative impact on either alignment, propulsion, or both. So more than anything else, we want the arm recoveries moving forward, and we want them to be executed in a way that allows swimmers to enter with the hand moving relatively forward. Arm recovery should also be relatively effortless. The arm should swing forward as opposed to being dragged or pulled forward with a lot of conscious effort. Swimmers are going to get tired when they race, and so the more energy they use with their arm recoveries, the sooner those arm recoveries are going to falter, the sooner they're going to slow down, the sooner they're going to become less effective. So if swimmers can swing those arms with less effort, more of a ballistic, inertial movement, it's going to create less energy demand, and that means they're going to be able to sustain it for longer periods of time. Having a great arm recovery in the first half of the race doesn't do you much good if it all falls apart in the second half of the race. Lastly, the arm recovery should be fast. It should be an arm path that's relatively small, and the hands themselves should move relatively fast. So you want high hand speed, and you want them taking a path which minimizes the distance they have to travel. If they don't have to go very far and they're moving fast, they're going to get through the recovery with less time. They're going to get through the recovery in less time. And fast now is going to be event appropriate. In a 50, swimmers are going to have to move their arms really, really fast. In a 1500, there's not quite as much of a demand on speed. However, it should be as fast as possible within the rhythm of the stroke. The arm recovery shouldn't slow the swimmers down. It needs to be as fast as it needs to be for the event. So we'll take a look at a couple examples here. So first, we've got more of a distance stroke. And what I want you to pay attention to is how the arms are swinging relatively effortlessly. She's not dragging them through. They're kind of swinging over the top, and how they're entering straight in front of her shoulders. And so if her arms are coming across the body, that's going to disrupt her alignment. It's going to put her in a position that's really ineffective to pull. But instead, she's got everything moving forwards. She's got everything working in the same direction. And that's going to allow her to, one, maintain her alignment, and two, get her arms in position to pull effectively with each stroke. So it's more about what the arm recoveries don't do than what they do. And in this case, they don't disrupt her alignment. They don't impair her ability to create propulsion. And because she's recovering them directly and quickly, they're always in position for the next stroke, exactly when she needs them to be, so that she can continue to drive herself forward through the pool. This is a really good example here of how the arms are just swinging pretty effortlessly. You can see the lack of tension in the arm. You can see how everything is pretty relaxed, how everything is pretty smooth, and that's going to minimize the effort that swimmers are using, and that's going to allow them to sustain those arm recoveries a lot better than if they were swimming with a lot of tension. Now here, we'll watch a sprint stroke, and what you'll see is that the arms are swinging. They're swinging a little bit straighter. They're a little bit more ballistic, but they're still swinging straight forward, and that's allowing the swimmer to get the arm in position to create a lot of propulsion. It's not moving side to side, so it's going to negatively impact how well they can pull, and it's not going to negatively impact the side-to-side movement of the body because it just goes right in, it goes right over the top, and it enters right in front of the swimmer. So the commonalities between those two arm recoveries is that they're both relatively fluid, they're happening directly, and that's allowing swimmers to optimize their alignment and the propulsion they can create with each stroke. The difference, in this case, the arm's a little bit straighter, it's moving a little bit faster, it's a little bit more ballistic, but it's still the same basic idea, still the same basic premise. So as much as possible, swimmers want to be able to recover the arms without disrupting the alignment, without disrupting propulsion, and doing so as fast as required. To give you a little bit better insight about what happens when the hands enter the water and why the recovery matters, we'll watch here. You can see she enters straight forwards, and she's still swimming straight. It's not going to disrupt her alignment. She's able to pull straight back, get right into the stroke without too much deviation, without having to adjust, and that's going to save her time, and it's also going to allow her to get more propulsion with each stroke. So she's able to pull right away, and she's able to recover the arms without disrupting her alignment. So effective arm recoveries are effective because of what they don't do. They don't disrupt alignment, they don't take more time than necessary, and they don't interfere with the ability to create propulsion. It's all about doing less, and the more swimmers can do less, the faster they're going to go. So what's the challenge with improving arm recoveries? First of all, there's individuality. Different swimmers have different limb lengths, they have different ranges of motion in the shoulder and then the upper body, and that's going to impact what options they have that are available to them to recover the arms. If someone's a lot stiffer, they're not going to be able to move their arms in ways that a much looser swimmer is going to be able to. So if you ask swimmers to swim in exactly the same way, with exactly the same arm recovery, it's going to cause problems because swimmers don't have the same options available to them. This is made more difficult because we don't know exactly how much mobility different swimmers have available to them and what arm recovery is going to be most effective for them. We almost have to let them figure it out. Another challenge is that the arm recovery is relatively ballistic. And so once the arm is swinging, it can be difficult to try to change the arm path during the recovery itself. And so it's a motion that swimmers can't really consciously control. They have to kind of set it up beforehand and then swing it through, and however they set it up is going to determine the arm path that they use. So it's a ballistic motion, which makes it a little bit more difficult to control, and they have to learn how to set it up at the end of the pull. The best arm recovery also changes with the speed that swimmers are trying to achieve. As we saw in the example between a distance swimmer and a sprinter, the arm path is going to be a little bit different, and a different strategy is sometimes necessary for swimmers to optimize their speed. So not only do swimmers need to have an effective arm recovery, they need to have an effective arm recovery for the given circumstance. The last challenge, especially in freestyle, is that the arm recoveries are at least a little bit asymmetrical. Due to the breathing, the arm recoveries are often different.
There's different amounts of rotation from side to side, and that can impact the path of the arm recovery. And so it can be difficult to tell swimmers exactly how to recover their arms when they're breathing, when they're not breathing, on their breathing side, on their non-breathing side. It's a lot for swimmers to manage through conscious control. So we have to give them options where they don't necessarily have to think about it, but they can kind of just feel and figure out what works best for them. So if we're going to find effective solutions, these are the problems that we have to solve. We have to account for individual differences. We have to account for the fact that these are ballistic motions. We have to help them learn to adjust their recoveries with speed, and we have to help them manage the asymmetrical demands of swimming freestyle. So having discussed why effective arm recoveries are important, what swimmers need to do in order to achieve effective arm recoveries, and some of the challenges of learning how to do so, it's time to talk solutions now, and we're going to work to solve those problems to help swimmers improve their recovery skills. We're going to use a couple different skill-based strategies that you can use to help swimmers improve, and then we're going to discuss a couple performance-based strategies that you can use to help challenge swimmers and challenge their ability to effectively recover the arms. Let's check it out. First up is paddle cap freestyle. Reality is if the breath is messed up, it's going to be nearly impossible to fix the arm recoveries, because if they're lifting the head, if they're pulling the head to the side, guess what? Those arms are going along for the ride. So if you want smooth, direct arm recoveries, you got to make sure that they can breathe effectively before you worry about anything else. So if you have poor arm recoveries and there's poor breathing, you got to fix the breath first. And so because ultimately we're trying to improve the arm recoveries, you want big changes in breathing fast. And to do that, you want clear, instant feedback. You want a strategy that's nearly impossible to get wrong, and you want to help as many swimmers learn at the same time so that you don't have to do all the teaching for them. Paddle cap freestyle fits the bill here because it allows for big changes fast. The idea here is pretty simple. Swim with a paddle on their head, and they got to keep the paddle on their head. And so if they're lifting the head to breathe, if they're pulling the head to the side, that paddle is going to come off. So it's a really effective way to help swimmers learn to keep that head relatively still and to keep the breath relatively tight. Once they can do that, then we can start going about trying to fix the arm recoveries. Because if that head's moving, it's going to be really difficult to get the arms locked in the way that we want them to. So the first strategy to really directly improve the arm recoveries is underwater recovery freestyle. So we're going to simplify the arm recoveries by removing them. We're going to have them recover the arms under the water as they swim. So the focus there is going to be on recovering straight forward and then pulling straight back. They want to keep it clean, they want to keep it direct, and they want to have the same rhythm as regular freestyle. So if swimmers have a lot of side-to-side motions, it can be helpful for them to discover how to move the arms straight forward and straight back. Rather than simply telling them what to do, you can make the exercise freestyle simpler by recovering the arms underwater, and they can start to feel it. And if they have poor breathing, you can start using a snorkel with this drill. So that way you can start addressing the arm recoveries without having completely fixed the breath to begin with. Once swimmers get the hang of underwater recovery, the next step is to recover one arm over the water and one arm under the water. And the focus there is still driving those arms straight forward, not having side-to-side motions in the arm recoveries, and being really direct with the arm recoveries. Over-under freestyle is kind of a bridge to regular freestyle because they only have to do one arm well over the water, and they can get the reminders of how to do the other arm under the water well. Rather than trying to tell swimmers how to recover the arms, just put them in a situation where they can start to feel how more effective arm recoveries are possible, and then we can go from there, transitioning to over-under freestyle and eventually regular freestyle. So if we watch them straight ahead here, we can see that the arms are recovering straight forward and straight back, and that's really what we're trying to reinforce here. More than anything else, we want swimmers to feel how the arms are recovering straight forward rather than side to side, and how that influences positively the ability to create propulsion and eliminate resistance. Then we can simply progress one arm recovering over the water while one arm recovers under the water. Next up is using as many different arm recoveries and alternating between those arm recoveries as possible. You can change the speed. They can go fast, they can go slow, they can go in between of the arms themselves. You can change the height. They can recover really high, they can recover really low, they can recover somewhere in the middle, they can really bend their elbow, they can recover it completely straight, or they can kind of have an intermediate hook recovery. You can have them enter wide, you can have them enter crossing over, you can have them enter straight. The idea is to allow them to explore many, many different arm recoveries because it's more likely that they're going to figure out what works for them and what works for them consistently. In particular, it can be really helpful to emphasize the opposite extremes. So you alternate between a really high recovery, almost straight over the top, and a really low recovery along the surface of the water, or a different elbow bend where they have the arm completely straight, or they have it completely bent.
By letting them feel these extremes, it's going to help them, again, figure out what's going to be best for them. You can also use a ton of variation where you switch it up in between repetitions, you switch it up within repetitions, and you can even use different arm recoveries at the same time. For instance, one arm completely straight, and then the other arm is completely bent. Having them swim with different arm recoveries at the same time, again, provides them with more information, helps them become more aware, helps them better feel how the arms are recovering and the influence that has on the rest of their stroke. As we talked about earlier, different individuals are going to need different arm recoveries in order to swim as fast as they can. And so this is a great strategy to help them figure out which arm recoveries are going to be most effective for them. Another powerful strategy is to hold very light resistances in the hands. For instance, you could put a couple coins in a small plastic bag and then hold that bag in the fist, or any other creative way you can find to put a small amount of weight in the hands. By adding the extra weight, swimmers are going to recover the arm in a path of least resistance. They're going to have to find a way to be more effective, more efficient, because the weight is going to challenge them. It's going to make it more difficult to recover the arms. The weight is going to exaggerate mistakes, and it's going to be a lot more difficult to recover the arm. And it's going to be a lot more difficult to use a poor arm recovery path, and swimmers are going to be able to better feel that by using the weight in the hands. Once you're using the weight, you can let them explore multiple recovery styles like we talked about with the previous exercise and let them figure out what works for them and what doesn't. Again, the added resistance is going to make it more obvious when a given strategy is effective and when a given strategy is ineffective. It doesn't take very much weight. It just gives them a little bit more feedback so they can better feel the impact of the arm recovery. And the more they can feel that impact, the more likely it is that they're going to be able to make a change and make a positive change that's going to help them swim faster. Another really powerful tool in terms of helping arm recoveries is to use different stroke rates. So all the previous strategies you want to use with as many different stroke rates as possible. So you have them go really fast, have them go really slow, have them go medium stroke rates, and then alternate between the two, whether it's paddle cap freestyle, underwater recovery, whether it's the recovery alternations, or even holding the weights in the hands. Using the different stroke rates is going to provide them with a lot of information about the effectiveness of different arm recoveries. Not only will it help them find a better arm recovery, it's going to help them find better arm recoveries based upon the speed that they need to swim. It'll help them learn to make those adjustments which they need when switching from a pretty slow tempo endurance stroke to a higher rate speed stroke. That's because different arm recovery strategies are effective at different stroke rates. You have to give them the opportunity to figure out what's going to work for them and when, and the best way to do that is to challenge them in different contexts by using different stroke rates. So don't just perform the exercises that we've talked about so far, challenge them by using different stroke rates. If you have a tempo trainer, great, but even without a tempo trainer, you can just literally tell swimmers fast rate, slow rate, medium rate, and that alone can make a big difference in terms of how they learn and how effective they are at using different stroke rates and finding the best recovery at that stroke rate. Having discussed strategies, let's talk sets. So they're going to go 450s and 475s twice. We're really trying to lock in the skills here. The 50s are going to be paddle cap freestyle. The first 25, they're going to recover the arms underwater. And then the second 25, they'll be over the water. And then the 475s are 25 underwater recovery, 25 over under, 25 regular freestyle. So those 50s, the idea is to get the paddle on the head, keep the breathing really tight, and then effectively breathe and recover the arms straight underwater during the first 25 and try to match that, be really direct on the second 25. Then the 475s are underwater recovery. Again, lock in the straight arms, straight recoveries. And then the second 25, they're going to go over under freestyle, and that's going to help them learn to transition from underwater to over the water, and then a 25 freestyle where they put it all together. In the first half, they're going to focus on building, and they're going to do so building each 25 to strong. On the second half, they're going to focus on increasing the stroke rate and descending 1 to 4 as they go through. So we're playing with speed, we're playing with the breathing, making sure that's locked in, and we're playing with the different arm recoveries under the water and over the water to help swimmers learn to be really direct as they move through the arm recoveries, which is ultimately what we're really looking for. Next set, we're going to go 2 rounds through. They're going to go 425s freestyle at a strong effort. The odds are going to go left arm straight, right bent, evens right bent, left straight. So that way they're playing with the different arm recoveries, the different arm paths with those 25s, and they're doing so at a pretty challenging effort. Then 4-100s, 25 low recoveries, 25 high recoveries. So low recoveries to the water, and then high recoveries to the water, and then a 50 normal. The odds, they're going to build the 25s. The evens, they're going to build the 50s. So again, we're playing with speed, we're playing with different arm recoveries, and then they're trying to put it all together with what feels best. Then we'll finish it off, 450s, solid effort, descend 1 to 4 at the same stroke count, second round faster. So they've got a different feel for straight versus bent, low versus high. And on those 450s, they're going to try to put it all together. They've got to be efficient and they got to create speed with that same efficiency. So a great way to challenge swimmers in a lot of different ways, help them explore different arm recoveries without really altering the basic structure of the set. We're still doing 425s, 400s, 450s. It's just like swimming regular freestyle, except they have the extra challenge of recovering the arms in different ways. Last set, they're going to go 2 rounds through. They're going to go 425s freestyle. They're going to go strong with light weights in the hand. They're going to go straight arm with low recoveries, then bent arm recoveries, then straight arm with high recoveries, and then choice recovery. Then they're going to repeat the same thing, but they're going to go as fast as possible at 1.5 seconds per cycle without the hand weights. Same basic structure in both cases, but we're adding the challenge in the first half by going strong with light weights in the hand, and on the second half, we're challenging them to go fast with a capped stroke rate. So in this set in particular, we're trying to help swimmers figure out which arm recoveries to use at high speeds. We're using different types of arm recoveries to help them figure that out. Of course, this is simply an example, and you can use whatever type of arm recoveries you'd like and whatever you feel is really effective at helping them figure it out. This is just an example, and it illustrates the concept of having them go fast, use different arm recoveries, and try to figure out which one's going to be most effective for them. So arm recoveries are important in the sense that they help swimmers maximize speed by not interfering with other aspects of the stroke. So if the arm recoveries are impairing alignment, if they're disrupting the ability to create propulsion, or they're simply taking too long, those are all going to limit swimmers' speed. So we have to help swimmers learn how to recover the arms directly, how to do so quickly, and how to do so with little effort as possible. That's going to set them up to swim straight through the water and to create a ton of propulsion. If you want to learn more about how to help freestylers create a ton of propulsion once their arm recoveries are locked in, check out the video below.